wanted is we wanted some element that identifies that a organization who does formal testing and assessment has evaluated this product, because it gives you a certain level of assurance. Because they have to go through a formal process to be accredited, so because they're accredited, they need to follow formal processes in order to conduct the testing. So that was key. That's element number one. Second element basically is what did they basically conform to? So this could be standards, this could be policies, this could be PIPEDA, this could be GDPR, it could be all kinds of things like that. So that's the second element that we're trying to notify the consumer or the buyer, here's what it's been conformed to. And then finally, it's that QR code, right? It's that live piece that basically says, you basically take your camera, and most modern smartphones that all of us have, if you put a smartphone against a QR code, it'll automatically read it and take you to the site. So it's not before where you had to use an app to do it, it's built in to all the current operating systems, so it makes it easy. The other thing I want to talk about is QR code is not just something that we came across. If you look at the UK, spend a lot of money doing research on this area, would basically reinforce our findings that QR code is a great way for user interactivity. On top of that, they also said, okay, well maybe the youth of today will not recognize this or don't want to use it. And so what they did was they actually did a research paper that was dedicated to just youth to just say, would they actually use this? Right? Because it's not like all these other platforms that kids are using today, which basically are swipe up, swipe down, which is, I'll let Shaw talk about that. But basically, what it allows you to do is quickly just scan something and get the information that you need to make the decision. And that's what it was about. So we basically wrote this, and then within the document, we also wrote a whole bunch of specifications around this. Okay? Maybe I'll say one more thing. So the other thing I did too was at our last meeting in Toronto, I asked the group who was in attendance, we wanted approval to basically take this concept and actually submit it into an ISO committee, SC27. So it was submitted, but when we did this, the UK government also did a similar thing. They submitted their requirements for a label as well into the committee. So we had a discussion. The meetings were in Tel Aviv last couple of weeks, and I'm the editor of 27037, so it was basically held under my meeting. And so when this was presented, we actually had a really good conversation. One, because it showed that there was lots of national bodies who are interested in this, right, and are working on it. So we saw, for example, Japan is going to formalize this in some way, shape, or form and make it mandatory with the regulatory framework. We know that. The UK is also looking to go that route. New Zealand is evaluating this as well. Who was the other one? France is another. What is it? AFNOR. AFNOR is their national standards group. So I talked to those four national bodies who basically said that they thought this was great. The only pushback I got, quite interestingly, was from the US. And the US group is primarily vendors. And the vendor community said, no, 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 no. This is a legal problem. You can't put a label on a product as it's false advertising. I was like, well, that's interesting. What are you falsely advertising? The fact you don't have security, right? So, so that was interesting, right? Because the US had this different perspective from the rest of the world, but the rest of the world, which is primarily represented by governments, is saying this is what they need. So very interesting. So some recommendations, these aren't formally documented, I just kind of wanted to have them as speaking points because I know we're going to have breakout groups, but it's really talking about what we need to do. So I think it's very clear when we're talking to other national bodies, countries, that what we're seeing is a need for a label, right, and awareness. So it's not just a label on its own, it's the associated awareness to the different sectors, corporate and consumer. Then is standards that basically allow us to evaluate the products. And so in relation to this, while our whole process has been going on for the year now, what we've also done is the folks at Standards Council of Canada with the CSA, Canadian Standards Association, have filed a standard to actually do this. So it's called T200, it's been filed, it's been approved, and what's called the express version of the document's been written and is going out for review. And so that will basically be developed in Canada, US, because it's a binational standard, and we're hoping to have the first version produced by the end of next year. And so at that point, what it means is CSA and companies like UL, CSA, TÜV, others like that, can basically test to a formal specification and actually put a symbol on a product. So we're there, like we're at the cusp of getting there, and I think it's within our grasp now. And so that's going to help drive the decision. And then the other thing I'm going to put out there, and this is kind of my personal statement, so I'm just going to make sure that everyone knows this is my personal recommendation. I really think we need to consider a regulatory framework in our country, because if you look at other countries that I've had a chance to speak to, they are going that route. They're trying to figure out the way to get there, and they're trying to figure out how do you put that into place, even if it's a mechanism for purchasing, right? That's what they're seeing. So in government institutions, products that are going into those have to go through a formal assessment process. And that's what they're going to mandate at a minimum. In the case of the Japanese, I think what they're doing is that in their regulatory framework, they're authorizing the government to basically scan anything that they presume is an IoT device and is publicly available, right? Completely different perspective. So when you look at things like that, I think the landscape for this kind of stuff is changing. So I think we need to look at a formal way to basically say, can we help consumer and businesses be more safe, and what does that look like? I don't have all the answers, right? Like, so I can't tell you exactly what that looks like, but I think we have to have the discussion. Yeah, and that's it for me. Thank you. Oh. Jordan?
Thank you. For the QR code that's on the label,
yeah.
Can you talk at all about how that might help with onboarding, and whether or not IoT onboarding would be integrated with part of the labeling standards?
So part of the additional thing that we're considering, and so I think Jordan and Jacques are going to talk about their part about the resilience. So the other piece that we're looking at too is not only can we use it to give you that information, but potentially we can use it to help consumers quickly configure devices on a network. So for example, you get a new fridge, and so on that fridge has a QR code. So you want to connect it to your network, but a lot of people just aren't tech savvy. They're like, what do I do? All that kind of stuff. So we want to basically create a system that basically allows you as a consumer to go to a device, scan that device, and you have a router that has embedded technology that will understand that I'm trying to auto-configure a device for my network. And so when we say auto, keep a couple things in perspective. There's an infrastructure behind that, and that infrastructure is what's called MUD, right? And I'm not going to steal their thunder, but they'll talk to you a bit about MUD. But MUD basically allows you to, the manufacturer creates a usage description, which has all the details of what it is. Okay, not going to get into all the attributes. But it basically gets that file and says, here's what it is. It's a GE fridge, 123-X5. And so it now knows, here's this fridge, here's what it can do, here's the embedded technology, and here's how I can configure it. Here's what it can do, here's what it can't do. And so it automatically says, here's what it is, do you want to add it to your network? Yes, and you swipe to add. And that's it. So likewise, all of a sudden, your fridge starts talking to your TV. And you're going, well, it shouldn't be doing that. So the router should basically identify that kind of stuff, mitigate that. You get a notification onto your mobile device saying, hey, this has been quarantined because it shouldn't be doing that. What do you want us to do with it? So that's where that QR code comes in to help configure and notify the user, which is really the next phase of basically trying to embed all of that kind of home technology and even network technology, because this can also go into carrier-grade routers, all that kind of stuff that's being built, because of the code set that we're building is going to be standardized and going to be open sourced. So sorry if I stole your thunder.
No, no, it's great. Just wanted to make sure there's a linkage and that, you know.
Yeah. Alan?
Yeah, Fod. So, are you familiar with the mutual recognition agreements and the regulatory regime for terminal attachment equipment?
I'm aware of them, yes.
Well, do you think that that approach, I mean, just for the audience, just to say what, actually everything in Canada that attaches to the phone network, like a telephone or a router, is certified against a standard which is established internationally but administered domestically. And the way, it's a very light-handed approach to regulation in that each country enters into reciprocal agreement with other countries to effectively accept a certification done in their home country. So, and all of the certifications actually done in third-party labs, so it's a very light-handed form of regulation. And most of the enforcement happens at the border because most telephones are not made in Canada. So I think it's an example of a regulatory approach, and I'm going back to your point about regulation, that should be looked at seriously in this context because it really lends itself to international standard making, to using labs that are already established for looking at this kind of equipment anyway. So I think it's something that could be explored maybe in the implementation phase.
Yeah, and even if you look at what is being proposed right now in the EU, they have something also called CSA. Not like the CSA company that we're aware of, but it's a certification scheme that they're looking at for products in the whole EU. And from network providers to home computers, like everything is fully under scope for assessment. So different ratings will be necessary for different deployments, and that's what they're looking at. So I think when you look at something like that, if companies want to be either being used in the EU or Canada or looking to growth, and what's company isn't looking for growth, then they're going to have to basically start to think about how to meet these requirements day one. Even if you look at in the U.S., like a lot of states right now have, frameworks. The one in California is already, I think, in enforcement right now. I think there's one in Virginia getting ready for enforcement right now. So you're seeing all these states in the U.S. already making this movement as well, realizing that vendors aren't moving fast enough, that we actually need to get something there. And so it's really forcing the hand of the vendor community to really rethink cybersecurity for their products, which is a good thing. I mean, right? It's making us all safe. So, yeah. Anything else? Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Slides are voted in over here. Okay. So you may have seen some of these before. So in the Network Resiliency Working Group, our problem is that most of the... Is this live?
Does it work?
I don't know. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Most of the new devices being connected to the internet are things. And these things are not as secure as they could be. Certainly not, they don't have the same kind of security practices developed for them so far that phones and computers do, based on years and years and years of mistakes and learning. And so criminals have begun to exploit them and abuse them to attack other systems on the internet. And in the Network Resiliency Working Group, we have decided, or our thesis is that in order to protect all these other internet-connected systems, we have to first protect IoT devices from compromise. Okay. And so we looked at using the home gateway back here. So if you look in the bottom right-hand corner, the approach is to, within the home gateway or possibly within the internet service provider, to put in protection and to try to exploit the fact that IoT devices are really not supposed to be doing all kinds of things on the internet. Generally, they do a handful of things to use that in order to limit what they're allowed to do so that they have less exposure to internet-based attacks and they have less possibility to attack other systems afterwards. And so our goal was to put in a framework for that. So we did a threat analysis and basically looked at different mechanisms that we could use to mitigate each one of those threats. And we have a listing of it that'll be inside the final document. Probably don't need to go through it right now. And then we also developed a set of recommendations, which perhaps I will quickly walk through. In order to build a framework to mitigate, or in order to build the framework that we're imagining, CIRA has taken the lead in implementation and pulled in lots of other organizations and lots of other sort of open source projects. So that's a work in progress. We've also have a set of recommendations that are more short term that one could start to implement today. And so I'll flip back to that and we'll take a look. Okay, so for gateway developers, because the gateway is the most vulnerable IoT device, arguably, the first piece of advice is to follow secure by design practices that are the same kinds of practices that anybody who's doing an IoT device should follow. For the software development as well as for the lifecycle management of that software. Okay, and in order to address the second thread in our list, which I guess I should have maybe walked through on the previous slide, which is the compromise of an IoT device which has exposed itself to the internet at large, we want to be able to stop devices from exposing themselves without permission from the user. And so whenever a device requests to open a port on the home gateway that would allow anybody to come in, if that's an IoT device, then we should be getting positive user permission before we allow that port to be opened. Okay. In order to be able to apply any kind of sort of fine-grained access control mechanism within the home, we need to be able to actually know which device is which and be able to be sure that when we apply access control to a device, that when we try to filter traffic to a device, that we're filtering it for the correct device and the device hasn't pretended it's somebody else in order to evade that. And so when we're onboarding the device, we'd like to be able to onboard it with unique credentials. So with a different cryptographic key for each device. And that allows us to really know who somebody is, which device it is. And ideally, as we build a framework, that onboarding will be integrated with the live label and the MUD profile that we talked about earlier. In order to start in order to start to be able to apply access controls, we're encouraging gateway developers to be including the kind of software framework that CIRA is working on and that other people are also working on that allows you to apply access controls based on MUD. And then we also would like gateway developers, in order to help reduce the attack size in case there is some device in the home that is compromised, to be able to put in rate limiting. So that if something is an IoT device, by default there'll be some speed limit on it, which the user will be able to adjust as they need. But that will help to stop some compromised device from using the now very large home WAN connection. So to be able to not flood 100 megabits per second or a gigabit per second of traffic from one home through some refrigerator getting compromised. Advice to IoT manufacturers. First off, do a good job on securing your device, so follow all the same best practices that the gateway developers should be doing for their device to avoid compromise on your device. We'd like IoT device manufacturers to start participating in the manufacturer usage description ecosystem, so to start crafting MUD files for their devices. We'd like them to also support onboarding with unique credentials easily, and so through Wi-Fi Easy Connect, and then as there's a full framework for integrating Easy Connect with MUD, with live labels, that should be on there. And then in order to avoid compromise of their device from an external port, in particular, they should avoid, and this certainly would be part of what they'd be looking at through a secure by design, but we wanted to call it out specially, avoid just opening up your device to the entire internet. Use a different mechanism instead. And there are other mechanisms for allowing remote access that are host specific. So things like turn. And then to service providers, if you're providing a home gateway, please do whatever a gateway developer should and provide devices that are that secure. And then in addition to that, you can develop your own security scanning and user notification practices so that you know how to detect when there's something wrong within the home, and you know how to have a conversation with your user about it. And where possible to then make somewhat automated mechanisms for reducing attack volume closer to the source. So the other outputs from our group. So those are the main outputs were that high-level threat list, which I didn't want to walk through, but we have walked through in previous discussions. That high-level framework for protecting the devices. There's a certain amount of implementation that's been done. So there's a demonstration of discovering and applying access controls using MUD, and there's a lot of other work in progress related to MUD. A demonstration of onboarding with unique credentials, and lots of global collaboration that's going on in order to build that fuller framework. So if you'd like to come to our breakout and help us put together kind of a final set of recommendations, as well as give us advice on what we may have missed along the way if you've read the draft, we'd love to see you there. Mm-hmm. Jack, did you want to add anything else?
No? Any questions? Oh, wait for this.
Good morning, and great work and lots of progress. I just wonder if you could speak more about the global collaborations underway on the work. Thank you.
So go back, yeah. So when we started this project, so I guess CIRA's been thinking for a long time about the CIRA Lab part of CIRA, been thinking of building some sort of a home gateway solution to address this problem for a while, and then that was in response to the Mirai attack. And since then, we started collaborating with other CCTLDs around the planet, with IETF people, with local security people, with CZNIC, so across our global community, in trying to build a framework that is globally available. I don't want to build something just for Canada. It's got to be something that's standardized across the planet. Because essentially what we're building is a new way for provisioning home networks. It's going to impact everybody, potentially, hopefully, in the future. And that new framework needs to be, it has to be global in order to protect from global DDoS attacks. So you want to mitigate IoT device around the planet to be safe and secure. And having a framework like this that is totally open source, fully documented, standardized, is a lot of work, and that's why we're leveraging our global partners to make this work. So.
Are you aware of other competing initiatives for specifically provisioning home networks? Are there other organizations looking at it?
So in terms of competition to this, some IoT vendors have it looks similar because they have IoT provisioning solution. Let's say vendor A would have a system to provision the IoT device from vendor A, but not the other vendors because they're proprietary solution. What we're working on is something that I think is unique. It's a lot of work. It changes behavior at home, and so far it's making we're not reinventing the wheel. We're taking a framework in an enterprise network. How you create secure network in your enterprise, we're applying that to a home network because home networks are going to have hundreds, thousands of IoT devices. It's going to be a large-scale thing in the future. And today, we need to think of building scalable, automated, secure networks that will meet the future. Today, when you have 5 devices at home, you don't need this. But in the future, some people are starting, when they add an IoT device today, they look at the IoT device, they don't trust them, so they are trying to set up separate VLAN, separate networks inside their home gateways to protect that untrusted IoT device from accessing your pictures and your finance. So they're trying to isolate IoT device, and it's only the engineers can do that. A normal person can't. So you want to automate that. And then the other part for this is because you're putting something complex in network provisioning, the user part of it has to be super simple. So the guideline we have is grandma, 97-year-old, has to be able to provision this thing. And the only thing she can do is swipe up, down, left, and right.
So I guess the other comment is that while Sierra is leading a software effort, it's also a standards effort. And there's lots of individual vendors who are, am I not on? Okay. Right. So there are lots of individual vendors who have onboarding solutions of one sort or another. I think the hope is by building this framework, one, there'll be reference software, but in order to do a good job on building standards, or even in some organizations like IETF, in order to build any standard at all, you have to have some kind of implementation experience. And so it's giving all that implementation learning in order to build standards. And if somebody else has totally different software, but it's adhering to the same standards, that's fine. It gets the same thing done. So it's not, the goal isn't necessarily to have the Sierra code running on every box everywhere, but by writing code to do this, and also by working within the standards groups in order to take the learnings of that and make it usable by anybody, you're building a framework that can be applied all over the place, even if somebody
Andrew,
doesn't.
you have a question?
Just another answer. There is a informal group called the IoT Onboarding Group within the IETF. We actually had a meeting yesterday. We have a large grid of different solutions, and there are other people doing other things in other places, at other layers. Some of them have different sets of requirements. Some of them are very focused on very specific industries, and some of them are building things that are probably undeployable. So, there'll be a market shakeup and a fallout, and the devices that don't speak something useful in 5 years will unfortunately probably wind up in the dumpster.
And unfortunately, we are out of time. We've got to move on to the breakout sessions. Okay. But I would strongly encourage anybody who still has questions to go to the Network Resiliency breakout group. And I'll pass it on to Andrew. Sorry?
I'll take this, and then I won't stand up there. So we are going to have these breakout sessions now, so I'm going to put network resiliency over here, and labeling back here, and consumer education up there. So whatever you're interested in, you should go and talk about that, and we'll reconvene in about 40 minutes. There's time on the agenda for a break at the end of this, but we'll come back at 11:45.
I don't know if this is already being recorded, but how about we start with the live session? Yes, would you like something?
No, no, I want to. Whatever you're saying.
So we'll start the working group session on education.
Yeah, you have to go on the website. We're starting live, you guys.
Okay, sorry. If you don't mind, we'll start with the round table so everyone will introduce themselves, at least to those folks who are online. Start. So my name is Ruba Fattal, and I am from OCA, Office of Consumers Affairs at ICID, Canada. We'll be chairing this roundtable on education. I have been leading the working group on education and awareness for consumers on IoT devices, and we will take a turn to introduce ourselves on the table.
Hi, I'm Dr. Radha Kim Handy, and I'm an ICT expert and former Government of Canada expert on ICT and now independent civil society.
Hi, I'm Leslie Shade. I'm a professor at the Faculty of Information at University of Toronto, where I teach in the Critical Information Policy Studies stream and have a couple of SSHRC-funded research projects looking at youth and digital privacy policy literacy.
Hi everyone, I'm Shana Gersher. I'm with the Privacy Commissioner's Office of Canada. I'm here as an observer today on behalf of our office, and I'm working on IoT-related research paper and guidance for manufacturers and individuals at our office at the moment. So this will be informative for my work and the office's work.
I'm Dal Singh. I am here independently but work with Public Safety Canada.
Alex Bushell, I'm the Manager of Strategic Policy at CANARIE, who's one of the partners in the multi-stakeholder process.
My name is Michael Richardson. I have a company called Sandelman Software Works, and I'm working on a great deal of the network resiliency pieces, but I'm also working on a document that is a playbook on how to take devices offline and then restore them to service, and how to communicate that to the industry.
Brad Fisher, Manager, Risk Assessment Division in Consumer Product Safety at Health Canada, involved in this from the product safety angle, and we've been working with some international partners on looking at the product safety aspects of IoT. And while it's not directly related to security, there is certainly a lot of overlap between security, privacy, and product safety. So part of why we're interested in this.
Thank you all. So I will start the discussion by Dr. Kim Henley. Oh, there's just one person who just joined us late, so let us know who she is.
Hi, my name is Natalie Campbell, and I'm Communications Lead for Internet Society North American Region. Communications Lead for the Internet Society's North American Region.
No, I was just wondering if you wanted to do sort of like a summary of the issues that we want to discuss. And
yeah, I'm not sure how loud we're speaking to the live stream, because we're being live streamed, right? We're being live streamed. So, okay, I know. So I was just wondering if there could be like a summary of the issues we wanted to focus on for discussion. And I just wanted to add that in my like my last engagement with the public service, I was involved heavily in the awareness and education, successful awareness and education program of intellectual property. So for CIPPO, so that's interesting for us to bring perhaps some of that experience to this group.
So we have 45 minutes in order to discuss and finalize the recommendation and to discuss some aspects of implementation. How do you see we can implement? Sorry, I'm going to try to speak to the table. I know, I keep thinking of the live stream. First, let's start by discussing the key messages. Okay. And if you find any input, if you have any input on the key messages themselves, how we can implement an awareness, perhaps, campaign. What do you see like the future for this product? What do you see the next step for this product? So we can come back after the session and share with the group. And I think the topic of discussions are really how could each recommendation be carried out? So if you have a recommendation, how could it be carried out? Yes, okay. So let's start with that first. Do that. We'll start with both. So first, the key messages. I don't have them in front of me, but I think, yes, the table. So I'll read them one by one, and you let me know what your point of view is on each, and I'll record that.
First, the recommendations.
Yeah.
So the recommendations are the key messages? Is
Yes,
that?
exactly.
Sorry, I was thinking my computer's super slow.
No problem. So as we said, there are 6 recommendations, okay, for the before purchase. So I'm going to read them one by one. Make sure you understand and consent to how the device is collecting, using, sharing your data. So this is for the consumer. An equal message to the supply side. Improve accessibility and content of privacy policies. Provide clear answers to how the device is collecting, using, and sharing data. It's always a parallel kind of a message. So any comments on this one? So that has been shared in the report that they sent out.
It's a bit awkward to navigate because it's a PDF, but it's on page. Because it's on page 50. I don't know how that works on your phone.
Well, let me see if I can find it.
Until you can find it, I'll just move on, perhaps. And if you have, oh wow, that's fast. Okay.
So basically, our goal will be in the how we're going to implement
Mhm.
that this goal is achieved.
Yes.
That consumers understand
Mhm.
how the data is collected.
Exactly. And from my understanding, is to finalize the recommendations. Like, do you have any recommendation on these messages? And then how do we implement? What are your vision for implementing this? So I'll go a bit faster with the messages. The second one is to ensure that the devices you purchase come from reputable certified manufacturers. This is very important that consumers are not only focused on the cost, because sometimes consumers are only focused on the cost, so we want to tell them that it's not only about cost, but also about safety and security. For the manufacturer, clearly lay out the shared responsibility regarding the device security. For example, convey expectations to consumers' awareness and responsibility for how to secure the device. Do you have any objection to this one? Yes.
So these are I guess, just general recommendations that have come from the group in terms of the types of things we want to communicate,
Yes.
but not necessarily, these are not necessarily the key messages we'd be communicating, correct?
These are not necessary. So
Okay.
for the campaign, we don't know exactly which one of these do we want to. For the campaign, we don't know which messages we want to implement, but we are saying that this is all the messages that we came up with from a process of a 1-year consultation with the group. Okay. Where are we now? So the third one is to check if there are any extra functionalities for the device. Some devices, like you buy a camera or you buy a TV, a smart TV, and there is a functionality where the TV is recording your conversation. So to understand that you have to consent, that there is a button that you can click to either deactivate or activate that function, but it has to be clearly indicated.
This is the third one.
Yes. No. Yes.
So then the awareness that there might.
Yeah.
So that the issue is that to ensure the awareness that the device might have extra functionalities,
Yes.
and if they do, that these have to be clearly identified.
Exactly.
Perfect.
So these would be things that may be outside of what you would expect the device to have?
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Or might not be enabled on the first version of the device.
Right.
Sometimes they are coming enabled.
Right.
It's recently a case, I can't remember the product now. It had a microphone. It was not enabled on the first build of the device. The software was not there. There was nothing to do. And then the next upgrade, it suddenly has a microphone.
So
right?
that has to be, the people have to, users have to be aware that the devices might very probably have other functionalities of capturing data, et cetera, so they have to be aware.
Yes.
But from the example he gave, it also sounds like it's a functionality. The functionality could change over time as well. So
Exactly.
which is
there's
a little
double
different
awareness.
than
so
this,
then
right?
We should add that.
Right, because I think what you were saying is a bit
Extra
different from this, in that the functionality. So there's the extra functionality. There's also the idea that functionality could evolve over time.
So it could be of the device on the current or future upgrades. So that there means that exactly, because of the QR code or whatever it is that it's going to download, because the devices also have automatic downloads of the devices generally have automatic downloads of updates.
We hope they do.
So, well, some of them do. So you're totally right that maybe the functionality of the device did not have a device did not have a functionality in the current version, but when the download of the software occurs, then there's this added functionality. So that's a very important point.
Okay, excellent. I will add that, because here we are just focusing on the functionality when
In
you
the current.
purchase, but not when in the future. So I'll add that to
Right,
to
and
that.
then and actually one of the capabilities of IoT devices is that they download or upgrade automatically.
Yes. Yes. So that's a good
So
point.
there's a corollary here, which is that if the device is upgraded later on, you may discover as a consumer that you no longer wish to own the device.
Correct.
As a result of the new functionality, which may not be optional.
Correct.
And so now you have the question of, do I get my money back? Right. Because you wouldn't have purchased this device had you known that you were going to be forced to adopt a new feature that you didn't want. Okay?
That's why it's beforehand. Like they have to
Right,
ask
so that's
these
beforehand.
questions.
But since it evolves, the question is, am I locked into the new advice and the upgrade to the end user license agreement?
Right.
That's an issue.
The device wouldn't change, it's just the software.
Well,
May or may not.
For instance, you could have a intelligent speaker which processes all of its audio locally, okay, and has functionality. You can speak to your refrigerator, you say order coffee, it does that all within the device itself without any communication to the cloud. And then the next revision uses the cloud. And now you're being recorded elsewhere. And you say, well, it's not new functionality. He says, yes, but there's a new agreement here.
So there's, yes.
Which raises an interesting kind of like question on the regulatory side as well, right? Because if you're talking about like being able to opt out of something like that, are you also opting out of software updates that could have potential safety and security concerns, right? So that's a legitimate possible safety concern.
Yeah, sorry, could you both of you repeat, because for the wording, like for wordsmithing,
it actually is.
Can you opt out?
Oh, crap, now I gotta remember what I said. So, like, I mean, if the idea that if there's a new functionality that you can opt out of, that you should not also be able to opt out of future software updates that could have security or safety updates included with it, right? So, how does that opting out process work if an evolution of a product has a new function that you don't want?
Remember, though, this is a key message to consumers. So here's the wording that I'm thinking of a consumer. Before you purchase the device, make sure that you can opt out of new functionality, such as future updates to software. Does that make future features?
Without
features without
opting out of security.
Ah, okay.
Or I'm just thinking, I mean, I don't know, like,
yes.
If the security update has other unintended risks of, taking the update of the security, but it somehow increases what sensors are communicating to what. I mean, if a user wants to opt out of any update, then the risks should be communicated of opting out. I think that's another sort of element. You're suggesting security updates should not at all. No one should be able to opt out of those, and maybe that's a position that's worth.
I'm actually saying that if you wish to opt out of things, then potentially you get your money back. Okay, so for a light bulb, you may think no big deal. For a large appliance, including up to an automobile, do you wish to have the update for the lane keeping if you believe that's unsafe?
Sorry, I just have to just stop for 1 second. We really have defined the scope without including automobiles, just because that's
fine.
But let's say a fridge.
That's fine.
Yeah.
A fridge. Okay.
Example's still relevant.
Okay. Yes. Well, no, I'm not. I'm not including autonomous automobiles in scope. I'm saying, what if the upgrade to your non-autonomous automobile makes it autonomous?
Right.
Okay. And you're like, no, I don't trust that. So, it's a safety upgrade. Okay. Well, no, I don't want the car taking over what I'm doing. I purchased a non-autonomous automobile. I still expect updates to the automatic braking system. Okay. Or the whatever it's called.
I totally understand your point, but just
the refrigerator,
keep
the refrigerator, okay,
home devices.
We don't think of a refrigerator as being safety specific until it becomes used to attack infrastructure, okay? So the refrigerator that suddenly listens to you and offers you sales, something you don't want, and yet you would like it not to have a refrigerator that suddenly attacks the internet, okay?
Okay, point taken. Just
so I think that for wording,
I'm a bit cognizant of time. So we have so many other messages. Do you have any?
No, I was going to say that for the wording on this one, like, I mean, I think that it should be the awareness of the policy of the product regarding hardware and software updates. Because as we were saying before, perhaps it costs a bit more if the the company, you know, like, I mean, there has to be a policy or something,
Yes.
but if they will exchange it or do something, whatever, and maybe you buy then a more expensive product or something. But anyway.
Perfect.
So that awareness.
Excellent. Thank you.
I guess what kind of strikes me about the discussion that we're having is we're still sort of trying to tweak what we think the messages are, which is probably okay. But then when we're getting into, because I don't know how, like, functionally it makes sense that we would want to communicate these types of things, but practically when we get to how we would implement these kinds of recommendations, like as somebody who does our program does a fair bit of outreach to consumers, it would have to be, we would have to figure out how to prioritize and simplify, because even the messages that are here are pretty jargony and pretty hard to understand, and I think all these points are important, but then it might have to be a sort of a multi-phased approach on how you may want to communicate these kinds of things to consumers, especially some of the more nuanced things around, like, if you buy a product 5 years from now, they decide to upgrade it and you don't want it anymore, you should think about whether you can get a refund. And that's something that will be a difficult thing to communicate to a consumer off the bat, but it's something that we may, when we're talking about what are the strategies to communicate some of these messages, including simplification, I think how we would prioritize them is something you'd need to consider as well.
I mean, if you want to just jump to the next things that how we're going to do it, I'm sure that little snippets of short videos talking about each one of these issues, either online or on the TV or whatever, is a very, it's easy. I don't think it's so difficult. Imagine discussing intellectual property to somebody in smart videos so that they understand it is doable. And I just think that what eventually is going to happen is that there's going to be, I know, 5 groups or 6 groups of big messages that can go all together, you know, and you just have, you know, anyway.
I just don't want to confuse things. How about we just go through these messages?
Number
if there are
4.
something like really that sticks out, like a point, like you said, not just currently, but also in the
That's
future,
very good. Very good
we
point.
mention it, and then we move on, and then we can go to the implementation
time.
phase.
For number 4, we'll do that.
Number 4, check for user reviews labels. So this is where we are connected with the other group, which is working on labeling and standards. We're saying how we can raise the awareness of the consumer on what they are doing on the labels and the codes and all of
Or
sorts.
it means that the labeling will also have to be part of the awareness campaign.
Exactly.
That's
Absolutely,
right.
yes.
Okay.
So.
But that'll only be relevant if there actually is a labeling.
Sorry?
That would only be relevant if there
Exactly. So if there isn't,
No,
how
they
can I put this
in the
message?
in the labeling group, they just mentioned that basically that they're part of their outreach strategy is to have an awareness campaign of labeling. So that's
that's
part
how
of the
we're gonna
awareness
be
campaign.
working
Exactly. 5.
The 5th one is consider the life cycle of the device and the support available, and that's part of what you were saying, to keep your device in use for as long as possible. For example, verify ability and duration of security upgrades and patches.
That ties into that issue. Actually, it's not the same, but it ties into that issue. No. Yeah.
Something weird here. Okay, so now we go into the phase, the second phase.
What about the 6?
Oh, so is this number 6? Yeah, check that the device works even without internet connection. So some devices, for example, you buy a smart lock for your house, suddenly there's no internet. Is it still going to function? Are you going to be locked out? Cameras, what else? Fridges. Is the fridge still going to function, or is it going to shut down if there is an issue with the internet?
Ruth, are we working with the network resiliency group on that one? Because that's almost, it's very, it's a device issue? Okay. Are there devices that will work without internet connection? Okay. Okay. Okay.
All of our stupid devices work without internet devices,
The IoT
internet connection.
devices?
Yes, there are dozens and dozens of them that do not require a network connection. The internet connection is the lazy person's way of doing it. It's the version where you are not buying the product, but they are buying your eyeballs. Okay, you are the product, but then the other corollary to this is.
Oh yeah, okay. Yes, you're right.
Okay, the other corollary to this is though, will the device outlive the company? It's not enough. If the internet's down for 20 minutes and you can't use a refrigerator, order things online with your refrigerator,
still use a
that's fine. You can still use it as a refrigerator.
Right.
If the company that does the ordering goes under, can your refrigerator be order anything with another company.
But that applies to any other product in the market, really. If the company went down.
If Microsoft goes out of business, this laptop will continue to operate until the keys fail. It'll continue to surf the internet. You can continue to install new software, okay? And furthermore, he could install some different operating system on this laptop, and he could use it for essentially as long as there's electricity, right? We do not need that company alive to make this physical thing continue to operate.
Right, but if you
Okay.
bought a product from Sears and it no longer exists.
My dishwasher is from Sears, and it has electronics in it, and it continues to wash my dishes even
Right.
though Sears is gone.
So when it's finished, if it well, it doesn't matter. But I'm saying that if it goes, if the product is not available or the parts are not available currently.
I'm not talking about the parts. I'm talking about Sears goes out of business, my dishwasher stops washing dishes.
Ah, okay.
Okay.
I won't have
So
it.
that's what I'm trying to talk about, right? So
Okay.
so the point is that it's not just, oh, does it operate without an internet connection? Oh yeah, maybe it will.
Operate.
Now it will operate without an internet connection.
They
Okay.
mean function.
And then does it have its full functionality even without the company being there? So for instance, you can buy a dishwasher that I think you can buy a dishwasher that I can operate over the internet. I can turn on and off from my phone without the company existing. Which is different than if there's no internet, I can't turn it on and off without my phone, but I can still push the button on the front. Right?
Can I ask a follow-up question? Is it also then you're asking, can we also upgrade, like let's say you have a fridge with an IoT, but the company disappears. Can you still have another operating system installed and it's placed? Or is that too...
Way too detailed than what I'm talking about. I'm saying, can the intelligence still be used in a different way without the company's servers?
So I guess that the point is to be aware of what functionality the company, the provider, the supplier provides regarding working without internet connection and resilience if the app company or the company is the life cycle of the company.
Okay.
Because that's, I think, the awareness that has to be done, and that might be the issue of a product.
Excellent.
More
I noted.
And a simple example is that if you go and found a smart dishwasher or washing machine from 5 years ago, the app that you use to make it smart probably doesn't run on this year's smartphone. They probably have not upgraded that app. They probably haven't touched it in 5 years, and it probably won't install on an iOS, iPhone, or an Android phone today because phones have changed, right? So even though the company's still alive and the internet's still alive, the company has moved on. They're not maintaining that app anymore. They may have spare parts for your thing, but you can't activate any of the smart features of it because they haven't upgraded their app.
So
right?
I think so then consumers and suppliers
Mhm.
have to be aware, the suppliers of informing this and the consumers of looking at these issues when they
Yes.
decide to purchase a product, because you're very well right, like that will make the difference in pricing as we move forward for the smart devices.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much for these points. Now, once you have this device, what do you do? The first one is to follow best practices for network setup and configuration. This will help mitigate risk when using IoT devices. For example, change your online password regularly.
Sorry, what are we talking about now? The awareness? So wait a minute, awareness?
So this is now, once you have the device, what is
This
it?
is another point of awareness.
Yes, another
So
point of
once you have-
awareness.
yes,
Once you
okay.
have the device,
This is in the category of...
this is the category of once you have the device now. So
Yes.
not before you purchase. Once you have it, what do you do? So we are saying here, follow the best practice for network setup and configuration to mitigate risks. For example, change your inline password, and you're saying no.
No, it's meaningless.
Why?
Changing my Facebook password will not affect the security of
Facebook password
Well,
doesn't
that's what it
say that.
says. Change my online password.
Device password.
Right.
Your device password.
The modem.
Oh, no, not for the modem, but it means like if you have an account with GE, your fridge,
Yes, that's what we meant.
change your account with password to GE. I think
That's what we meant.
That's not the advice of people today. We do not recommend you change your passwords.
So what do you do?
Okay. In fact, the guy who recommended you change your passwords, the guy who recommended changing passwords recanted about a year after he did that, but IT people don't ever get the updates. No, you should have a strong password. You can write it down and stick it in a drawer. Okay? That's the important thing. And don't reuse the passwords.
Well,
right?
Don't reuse them between accounts. So like
Gene accounts. Your Facebook password is not your GE password.
Oh.
There's no reason to ever change your password on GE. Write it down, stick it in a drawer. Okay? It needs to be a strong password.
Okay.
Okay? If you change it regularly, you will put a weak password, you will forget it. You will use the password recovery mechanism. In other words, you'll use all the ways that people will social engineer you to attack your password. You will make them weak. So change your passwords is not a recommendation that is out there anymore. Has not been for 10 years, but if you work for the government, that bureaucracy will never change until people die. I'm sorry to tell you.
But I mean,
Yeah,
sorry,
and that's
but-
actually one of the contraindicated things, major contraindicated things. If you're forced to change it every 3 months, it's almost always related to your previous password. It's almost always weak.
Could you please
Yeah.
tell the
Yeah.
folks of IT this so we don't have to change our password?
I could, unfortunately, I would love to, but they don't really listen. So.
I think that for the focus on what is it that we're going to focus on awareness and education, I
Just
think
put
that the
put the period after devices. And
follow
take away
best practices for setup and configuration. Like the best practices for the setup are going to be provided by the manufacturer.
Okay.
And the setup and configuration, like the labeling said, will be provided by the manufacturer. That's going to be from the device.
Yeah.
And for setup and configuration, and if not, it will have to be discussed with the service provider. It's the only thing that I can think. And,
Yes.
and I think that what it is important is that the awareness focuses on following best practices and manufacturers' indications for setup and configuration.
Okay.
So then, if the manufacturer says opt for yes or no on something, then the user has to
Got it.
follow that.
Well,
Not
these
just
were
plug
anyway
it in
between brackets as examples. But yes, if this is a controversial example, I'll take
We'll
it
look for
out.
another one.
Got it.
We'll look for another one.
Wait, there is another one.
Just cross out what's in the parenthesis.
Got it.
Because we'll decide that later.
Because that's an implementation issue, and what the best practices are, as you just said, are going to change.
Got it. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Cross out.
And I think that in setting up the IoT devices, the best practices for configuration are when the user decides what is going to be yes, what is going to be no, what are you going to be authorizing, what use you want to do you want your location, et cetera, et cetera. That configuration is going to define what privacy, what security, how the broadcasting of your information, et cetera, et cetera. So I
Got
think
it.
that the best practices to follow according to manufacturers, and I think the awareness point is that people have to take notice that the IoT devices is not like the old fridge that you just plug in and don't read the instructions afterwards, right?
Yeah.
People plug it in,
Oh, I
use it,
see
and
what
then,
you mean.
and then
I see
read
what
the
you mean,
instructions
yeah.
afterwards.
Yeah.
And then it breaks because they didn't clean the drill.
Exactly, or they didn't take out the plug that was holding it, or the whatever. Okay.
Thank you very much. I really, really appreciate your feedback. So now for the second one. Know where to seek redress or address technical problems on when your device has been hacked. For example, for privacy, go to the Privacy Commissioner Office. For security issues, contact the Canada Centre of Cybersecurity, although our colleague from there just told us not to. So I have to go back on this point with him to wordsmith this better later on. Yes.
When it was up on the screen, it said IE. I just think that should be changed. I think that should technically be EG because it suggests that's the only place we should be contacting.
Got it.
And it's one of many.
I was going to make the same comment to above. Like I think you should strike everything after nowhere to seek redress or address technical problems when your device has been hacked, and then get rid of the rest because I mean. I think it's more of an implementation issue. Like for product safety, for example, we actually, we would be encouraging you to tell the manufacturer. You can tell us too, but then the manufacturer has an obligation to tell us. So I just think trying to list all the possible places, and there's actually none of the examples here are the manufacturer, which I think is odd. Like if there's a problem with the product, presumably the first thing people are going to do is try to contact where they bought it or the manufacturer. So I would that would be my suggestion.
I think
Got it. All the examples, I will. Yes.
I think that the who to call is part of the implementation, but for the awareness part of the message of the awareness, my issue is that how do people know when something has been hacked? That is like basically.
That comes. There is one.
It comes later. Sorry.
Compromise. Okay.
Right. Compromise.
I'll take the word hack.
Right. Right. So be aware.
Hacker is a positive person who is interested in technology.
Right. When the product is being compromised.
Compromise.
And part of the deal here about know where to seek redress is know who made the product.
Well, we can see that. Yeah.
Okay, that's the most difficult part is to know who made the product. And use my dishwasher example. I couldn't get my old dishwasher. I couldn't get it repaired because the model number had actually worn off the side of the fridge of the thing, and there was 6 different possible model numbers with 6 different factories apparently. So I had to replace the dishwasher because I couldn't get it repaired because I didn't know who to contact anymore.
Okay.
I mean, literally, I didn't know who made it. Right.
You know what? I'm thinking of moving actually this point, let me know what you think, to the before purchase, because they should know before they purchase it if there is a problem. Before you purchase, you ask the person you're buying it from or the retailer.
So maybe it should say maintain records on your purchases.
Well,
okay. This is a thing that people don't do. They throw out the manuals. It's just a suggestion. Maintain the records.
Stick them in a
right?
box.
Stick them in a box. That's okay.
But I agree, Ruba, with that point, because when you had the first point that said devices are from representative certified manufacturers, that include, you know, that provide information of where to.
So I'm going to move it. I'm more comfortable moving it to before purchase. I just got a signal that we only have 5 minutes. So let me just quickly go. No, but the last ones, after when you are disposing of it, is very standard. It's like reset to manufacturer. So that's very standard. So I want to just go to the third here. Be considerate, conscious of the implications or impact on your guests who are in the vicinity of your device. If you go somewhere, they have a device like Siri, for example, be cognizant that if your conversation might be recorded, you have to inform your guests. It might not make it to the awareness campaign that we're working,
No,
but
I think it is very important.
what do you guys think he's being...
I think it's actually going to be a serious social faux pas in 5 years if you do not inform your guests or do not do things. People already do this. The joke is the XKCDs. You walk into someone's home and you say,
Turn off
Siri,
Alexa.
or you say, you know, whatever, order 10,000 rolls of toilet paper. And if something happens, you know their device is on. Okay?
Sorry.
And you know, and all right, that's what people are going to be doing, and people are going to be having toilet paper show up in their home.
Oh, wow.
Excellent point for awareness.
Yes, okay then.
Is collecting, using, and sharing your data on that policy portion. And just a suggestion that maybe we want to be more explicit and say a device-specific privacy policy, where you would also include a list of sensors that are possibly inactive, and maybe later a software upgrade would create them and make them active, and your microphone is now listening. So a list of sensors, so something like a device-specific privacy policy, especially for the IoT world.
Can you please be aware of?
So a device-specific privacy policy would include things like what you have, how the device is collecting, using, and sharing data, but also a list of sensors.
So this is not for the consumer, as like this is not a
Well,
message to
the
the
consumer should be able to read and know this information, but the manufacturer of
so
the
the
device,
manufacturer.
should include as part of their device-specific privacy policy a list of sensors as well.
I can imagine a series of icons on the side of every device that lists what kind of sensors are in it, right? We can easily see what a microphone would look like, or a speakers, or a temperature. You know, you
got
could
it.
imagine a thing so that you can actually walk up
Yes,
to the
yes.
device and just pictographically, you know,
Exactly,
see
yeah.
what's potentially there.
Yeah.
Excellent
And
point.
and it's good for the consumer then, and they're aware of what they're buying.
Yes,
Thank
and
you
but-
very
but
much.
On the same
Have
token,
to, I really,
you know,
really
the
have
cameras on a laptop that's just sitting on a counter could be compromised, and it wasn't meant to. So, you know, setting up the device and protecting, anyways, awareness is good.
Okay, so we'll keep the awareness one. The fourth one, be aware that the security of your device is constantly being updated. Is that good? Okay. Ensure that the device is able
Cool.
to
We'll
receive
get started. Welcome
The
back.
same
Hope you
thing for
enjoyed
the
your
supply.
lunch.
The fifth one, I
I'm
think
Dustin
this is
Phillips,
great.
the
No
Executive
comment on this
Director
one. Ensure
of
that
the
each device
Greater
in your
Washington,
home
D.C.
is
chapter of the
secured.
Internet Society and
This is the
co-chair of the
point that
Internet
I'm not
Governance
sure of.
Forum
This we
USA.
had so many feedback.
This morning we heard a lot of
last time
different perspectives.
we had a meeting. Here's the wording again. Ensure that each device in your home is secured. The security of your home network is only as good as the weakest link. Not clear. I take this out. I take okay.
Yes, and I was just going to say.
That goes for a lot of these, though. Like, I mean, I
No,
think
but I was going to say
that's
that
why
the
we kick the can
security
down
of
the
the
road of
device
saying how
to
we'll
receive
actually communicate these
updates ties
messages, but I
in
mean,
to the practicing the setups and ties in to the awareness of the extra functionality of the device. So that ties into before, but the device is secure.
I take out this point then because it's not, because here it says something when possible. For example, turn off your modem at night to reset the IP address. There was there was a lot of controversy around this one.
That's silly,
And-
but
yeah.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Follow the network.
Follow the network strategy. I'm going to
Well,
take out this one.
yes.
Then 5 is deleted.
But you see the number
delete.
4?
Yeah.
Able to receive updates.
Yes.
The secure device and able to receive updates. That ties in to the point that Michael was making, that awareness, you know, that what if, I'm kind of like mixed up here now with my notes, but remember when we were talking about if the new update now added functionality,
Yes.
like able to receive updates in awareness
Should
ties
be,
into the
so you think it should be before you purchase the device? This point?
Ongoing, you need to ongoing be aware, make sure your
Okay.
device can receive
So I'll
updates.
keep it here.
So one of the
Yes.
reasons for not turning on, for leaving your modem on all night is so your device can receive updates.
Now,
Yeah,
for
but it will receive it afterwards as well.
now for time, just for time purpose, I will pass this mic, and each of you, please, one word, tell me if there was a campaign, how do you imagine it to be? If there is, yes. I'm just gonna take.
That's coming later.
Are you? Oh, because I thought we have to do
Yeah.
this now.
We'll do a breakout discussion.
Hello, everyone.
Implementation. This was just
Finalize okay, okay.
Yeah, it's
Because
on.
there is here and oh, wow.
Hello, everyone. The time for the breakouts is over. It's time now for a quick 10-minute break. We'll reconvene back in here at promptly 11 o'clock. Thanks.
So perhaps we can reconvene. I thought I would ask representative from each table to come, perhaps join me here, and we can talk a little bit about how the discussion went and what's happening. I don't know who wants to come from each table, but perhaps the conveners for each one would join me up here. I see you're all leaping to the effort. Sure, please. So we can talk about how this discussion went. Yeah, sure. Come. And I think these just have to be turned on, right?
Is it there? Yeah.
I think mine's on. Okay. Oh, but I guess Jordan had to take a phone call. Okay, so why don't we start with you, and we can talk a little bit about how this discussion went, what the results are, what the sort of next steps you think are going to happen.
Well, it was a very, very fruitful discussion. In fact, we went through the key messages again. Folks wanted to comment on that, and I wanted to listen from especially some new members who are joining us. And I got very important feedback on the key messages that I think we need to go back to the drawing table and tweak a little bit of the key messages. Although it's later in the stage, it's better now than after the report goes out. So I definitely would like to take the time to take into consideration, and I have spoken to few members who are willing to help to wordsmith a bit of these key messages. So I would like to take another round at some of them. Not a lot of changes, but important changes. So that's one. The second thing, one of the feedback I was getting that I was asking how come you were not with us before, because it's the first time I hear. And I got some feedback how to engage more and to involve more of the civil society and the private sector and important key players as we go forward. As for the recommendations for the next steps, everyone, I think, is in agreement that we need to take this further. Like, we shouldn't just let it rest and go, that we want to discuss. But I think that's for the discussion after the break, that we will go over what are the best methods to share these key messages. Thank you. I'll leave it to my colleagues now.
Okay. So first of all, no one yelled at me, so that was good.
We don't want to disappoint you.
No, it meant that we didn't do anything that upset anyone overly. So ours was a lot of clarification, was a lot of questions on how did we see this, how did we see that. I think the big thing was, is what's the next step? So that was one, is what do we do with this information now? And then two was the linkages. And so my answer to that is, I mean, we're working together on multiple projects with the router project, that kind of stuff. So with that and the other stuff, I think that's going on for some of the advisory groups, that's how we basically have that linkage right now. And that cross-contamination, pollination, I guess contamination's the wrong word, pollination would be better. Cross-pollination of just the concepts and making sure everyone's synchronized. So for example, like Michael is doing the stuff in IETF, and Jacques and Mark at Vigini has his group, also IETF, where I'm covering off the IEC and ISO connections. So that's how we're basically doing that whole cross-pollination and synchronization. As far as, and then also we were very fortunate that one of our UK colleagues was on the phone, Ed, so his questions were around, how do you see this label? Like, do you see it as an enforcement point around the consumer market or more markets? And my response to that would be, I just don't want this to be consumer-driven, because I think it should be around consumer, I think it should be around business, and I think it should be around industrial, right? Realizing there's different requirements for them, and that's okay, right? But it's around understanding that products need a label and products need formal testing and evaluation. And from that, then you know what you're getting yourself into as a buyer, regardless of what sector you're in. So I think those were the, kind of the key takeaways. I don't think I missed anything. Did I? Yeah. Yeah, I think that was about it. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so there were some new faces at the table, and also lots of very helpful discussion. One of the main sort of high-level things that came out of it was that in addition to having recommendations that are sort of short-term implementable, we should really have a future work recommendation section. So what should people continue to work on? What has value that we identified that's not fully baked? And so within that would be things like continuing to develop the implementation and flesh out what pieces need to be put into that implementation. A security analysis on all of those new pieces that are being implemented, because once you have a significant amount of new stuff, how secure is that? Because it's a fairly large, implementing these these access controls becomes a fairly large project with lots of interfaces inside it. And so just understanding, putting in the effort to try to make sure that those aren't then turned around and used to do more denial of service. Also, indicating what needs to be done from a standards development perspective. So there was lots of discussion on live labels and fleshing out, how to have one label that does lots of different things, and what all those interactions are. So it's because that label is helping the device get onto the network. It's helping indicate what the profile is on that device for access control. It's doing, there's a lot of user interaction involved, both for managing permissions as well as for understanding what the device is capable of and indicating when a device is in or out of support. There's a lot of things that could be loaded into that. And so continuing to flesh out each of those individually. Looking at credential management for IoT was something new that came up that we hadn't really talked about before. If part of your best practices on an IoT device is not using a default password, and if we're doing onboarding for it, if we're assisting with onboarding, how are we managing those credentials? And then quarantining, unquarantining. So there's a lot of pieces that we've sort of identified as, hey, this should be part of the solution, and there's some work ongoing on, but to really indicate here what a lot of those pieces are and what the direction are that they're going in, and that gives us a chance to sort of re-articulate the vision as well as show what work needs to be done to get there without, but separating that from kind of day one stuff you can do. So having two kinds of recommendations at the end.
Yeah. And then another thing we talked about is potentially for ISOC to create a manners like for IoT. So manners is mutually agreed norms for routing security. So it's for the network operators to operate all the same way on the internet. And we should create something like MARIS, which is mutually agreed norm for IoT securities. And then that could be some sort of certification that IoT device or gateways meet to ensure they meet the requirement of the recommendation that we provide in there. Or use a recommendation as a basis to define what the norms for IoT security should be. That's about it. Then there's other stuff like we talked about storing offline firmware for IoT device in case the IoT vendor goes offline. So we talked about that. It's common knowledge in the group that we do that, but it's not documented in the recommendation. And that's about it. Any question?
So is that sort of an escrow idea that you're mentioning, that basically you've got this firmware for people that are creating devices, you put them somewhere, or?
If in the MUD profile there's a link toward where the firmware is for that version, then we're going to download that and keep a copy of it. And then if they're signed, then I'm not sure how they're gonna be useful.
Right.
But the idea is to at least keep a offline version so that you can recover, you can go back a couple of versions and restore the device to some known good configuration.
So
Maybe.
there may be an interesting legal problem there, right? Because many of the manufacturers claim intellectual property rights in that thing. So there's this interesting problem about taking the things and storing them, because the legal framework in some places doesn't allow you to do that. It's actually an interesting problem in this space that I think it's worth considering.
We'll just store the firmware on the moon.
Right.
There's no jurisdiction there. So
That's good. We'll put it on the moon.
But then you have to move your headquarters to the moon. And that's a long way to go for meetings. But in general, I think there is that question of, somebody brought up, well, what happens when a device is out of support? Right. So at least working through that, and if nothing else, making that transparent to a user. So from a standards perspective, how do you support that?
So I think this is a great question to bring us to our next little topic here, because this really amounts to a question of implementation, right? How do we take these recommendations that we've got so far, how do we take them and turn them into concrete next steps? So I heard a lot of people talking during the sessions about, the next steps, and you've all sort of suggested that actually what the next steps are is one of the critical problems. Well, I think the next step is sort of move to implementation, right? Get my engineering hat out. I don't really believe that you understand what you're doing until you try to do it. So, so this is the suggestion that we have. So there are really two big questions. We're going to have another breakout session, and there are two big questions that we want people to answer. The first one is, how could the recommendations that we've got here, how could they be carried out? This may be a great opportunity to decide whether we've got good recommendations, because of course if the answer is, well, I don't know how you'd carry that out, that suggests that maybe the recommendation needs to be polished a little bit. So that's one thing, and we need sort of to write down what the tasks are, what is it that people would do. And then the other part of this, of course, is who, because if there's nobody who can do the thing, we see this a lot, particularly with internet regulation, right? We see very often there are regulations and they say, well, people should do this, and it's like, well, who should do this? Because it's not clear that there's somebody who's in the position to implement that. So that's actually the other piece that we're hoping will come out. And remember, the point here is to have concrete steps, things that we want people to do that are actual things that somebody could go home and work on them now. The next thing is, to do those things. So that's really the goal. I'm glad there wasn't a second slide. I didn't think there was, but I'm sometimes dumb about these things. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back into the groups that we were in, or I guess you could change groups if you really wanted to, but it may be a little bit awkward to do that in the middle of the conversation. And we can work on that. And somewhere here I have the time. So we're gonna do that for I guess about an hour. Talk about the implementation, and again, concrete steps. We want to have concrete things. When we come back after about an hour to talk about this, we can see what things that people are going to go away and do. And remember, it's not okay that the only people who are going to do this are not in this room. You got to have people who are actually here to sign up, because if it's all somebody else has to do this, well, somebody needs to be here. All right, thank you.
Yeah, we would detect.
Because I was,
Um, Right? Send me your resume. I don't know my
Sorry.
Sorry, and I just hit your head. Sorry, none of the colorful language.
Are we online again? No, people are going to watch. Like, we're banging our heads here.
Riveting TV, I'm sure.
I wasn't able to find the live stream, so I wasn't able to.
So,
if someone watching and wants to ask a question or contribute, I couldn't find the live stream from today. I found all the old history, but I didn't find today's live stream. So,
Well, they have people calling into some of the other groups, so maybe there just isn't anybody listening to it.
well, it actually. Well, yes, it's on the website. There's no link for the session.
So we're live again?
We are live again. Is this okay?
Well, I can see it in my computer. And you can see it? Okay.
Sorry, Michael. Okay, so we are we're back again and trying to answer the two questions of the what do you envision for the implementation phase, and who do you think would be capable of doing this. So how about I pass the mic first?
Okay.
So this is Dr. Kim Hendy, and I believe that there is an excellent opportunity to take some a model of what CIPPIC has done in the last year and a half on their awareness and education campaign and do a three-prong approach on having information online, snippets of basically of each point that we raised, like a small video, like a quick way of public and manufacturers understanding it. The three-prong approach, because you want to make it online, you want to make it personal, and you want to make it that somebody can, that there's a phone line. And I believe that as we transition, at least in the first stage, there's an opportunity, I have to say, for government to provide a 1-800 number or something, because there's an awareness campaign and people have all kinds of questions as you bring this to the fore. So you want to make sure that people can actually start answering, like there's these campaigns on the TV, if you want to go to Newfoundland and Labrador, there's a number, call Diane, and, people can, so there's an interaction with the people. And I believe that it's very important that especially the public has a way to interacting, because we have to be mindful that our audience is all kinds of languages, all kinds of ages, all kinds of cultures that are going to be interacting with things. So anyway, so the approach that we used very successfully at CIPPIC was to have the online information to download, as well as a 1-800 number, as well as seminars, live seminars, not that many, but then webinars. So if you're not an internet savvy person and you don't have technology, you do have the opportunity of speaking with a human being. I have to say that it would have to be, in my opinion, it has to be like sort of like a government-led at this point that would outsource. But it has to start by being, I would say, government-led with not involved directly, but led at the beginning at least to ensure that all the pieces are in place, and then it would have to be perhaps outsourced or just the different parts. But for example, in CIPPIC, the people that did the videos was outsourced and so on, but it's residing in a government website. And I have to say that because the public trusts the Government of Canada websites.
Just to jump in on that one, Joe, just a point of question is, for the 1-800 number, that could lead to very technical discussions with people, which I don't think, we're not a tech agency, government, we don't give technical advice, so I think it might be different for CIPPIC, because CIPPIC, I believe you were doing information, was it oriented to small business, or what were you trying to do with CIPPIC? What kind of information were you giving?
Well,
Okay. it's working.
It's because we're just doing, it's not too, it's for the live streaming, that's why they asked us to use it. While there was specific CIPPIC experts, some of them were, what there was a couple of questions to triage the, it was sort of like the point of entry. And so what we did in those call centers was really to triage the issue. For example, you know, while not providing technical advice, basically to say, you know, have 3 or 4 questions to be able to redirect. So, oh yes, you would have to call the manufacturer. That information is on your label. Okay, so, or please check your label, or, you know, whatever. Or, you know, my house is on fire, maybe you should call 911. So, like, you know, like a triage thing. But I think that when, like, people would say, oh, I didn't know there was a label. Yes, the label has that information. Okay. And then as people are more aware, then perhaps it would be like a sunsetting sort of like experience. But as, yes.
So this would be after we had developed the labels then? Is that what you're thinking? 'Cause
Absolutely.
we don't have labels now, so.
Well, no, but they are going to be coming. So even if the awareness is like, you will find this information on the label.
So
Like,
at a future point then?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Any other questions, Pam?
No, that was helpful.
Can I just raise a little point on this? Whenever I look at involvement, especially if it's government or any multi-stakeholder, what I liked very much about this project was the multi-stakeholder approach. So that's why I don't see it just being a government-led approach, but really a multi-stakeholder approach where private sector and the public sector together are doing something together as a multi-stakeholder. The other thing I also wanted to raise about the phone line, if we look at whatever we are going to implement in the future, at the impact and the cost of things, I'm more lenient if it's just going to be to triage, to go to the online. Like if it's just to give some information, like you said, your house is on fire, call 911. Can't we just give that online so that we can also, if we look at the cost versus impact of having an online, this is like my question from your experiences.
Right.
Had that.
So when government-led, I understand that this process is government-led. While it's not all done by the government, there's somebody that has to lead. Otherwise, it's anarchy and it doesn't work. So this is to implement a program, and once it's implemented, you know, perhaps it works differently. But when I mean government-led, and well, I'm now in the private sector, but I think that somebody has to give a direction, and then they involve all the parts. It doesn't mean they have to do it. So if Sierra is going to be the trusted people that are going to implement a part, that's fine. If it's going to be an NGO, a university, a chapter of the Internet Society that is going to do an awareness campaign, is it going to be, is there going to be a funding to develop snippets of videos? That's a different story, but somebody, in my opinion, has the lead. Now, on the issue of the 1-800 number, the reason why CIPPIC was successful was that you have to understand that, 1, your modem is down or you don't have internet, and your fridge, is it still going to work? 2, if there's no electricity, then you cannot go online. And then there's a lot of people in the world that don't access the internet for those things, like, you know, age groups, people with disabilities. The modem, my cell phone was stolen when I was traveling, and then when I came back, my modem broke. So it's almost like I was. Well, I did. But no, not new devices. No. What I'm saying is that if I had an issue with one of my devices, like a printer or something, you have to provide a way that is not online for an issue that is online. So that's why I think that's why it's successful. Like, you have to allow Mary up the road that doesn't understand a lot about computers. She doesn't know.
Okay.
She just bought a toaster. She plugged it in. It's an IoT device. She doesn't know. All of a sudden, she says, why is it sending an email to me telling me to take 2 toast instead of 3. Like, you know, you buy a device. Do you know if it's an IoT device? I bought a printer. Then 4 days afterwards, it sent me a message saying we're downloading software.
That's why I think if I could just add my 2 cents and then I'll pass to everyone else, is to have the campaign specific. For example, if it's to seniors, to go to senior centers and have these specific message campaign, youth, go for example, schools or universities. These are just my 2 cents, so I'm going to pass.
Absolutely, that's why. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think there's different audiences for these IoT devices, and so the language and the messaging has to be quite different for each of them. And I think it's important to think about information intermediaries, public librarians, for instance, as a valuable group to do consultation and training about this. Community centers, things like this, media literacy organizations, just right down the street, Media Awareness Network in terms of parents, in terms of educators and whatnot, of the Internet of Toys and things like this. So it's got to be a multi, I like the idea of thinking about the multi-stakeholderism aspect of that for sure, but you have to get those information intermediaries that are on side with that, and the big question I have is dollar signs, like who, you know, who pays for this, where is this, you know, where's this money coming from? And so aside from the consumer awareness, it's also the citizen use of this. It's not just your consumers and your citizens as well. And so I'm always thinking about issues of data and discrimination. And so what is the sort of downside of some of these devices as well?
So I think you, Kim, sorry, I think you actually raised an interesting point about the toaster. You said if you plug in a toaster, you don't know it's an IoT device. But if you don't know it's an IoT device, you're not going to know to call the IoT hotline either. So there's something, I think it is the intermediaries. Like we have to, if people don't understand, they're not going to know where to go. So it's a chicken and egg approach where you have to know what your issue is to know where to look for the results. The phone line, I'm not that wedded to either way, but if you've got these people in the middle, they're probably not going to call a phone line. They're probably going to go to a website, or to, you know, they're not going to know everything about everything. They'll know where to turn to, though.
I think because when we were looking at going through the recommendations and the key messages, I think before you jump to a consumer outreach campaign, you need to understand what it is you want to communicate. And so I think there would need to be a lot to be done with these sort of high-level messages to figure out what are the key messages, well, how can we prioritize those, and how can we simplify them and put them in manageable chunks. And in terms of who does it, I don't think we could say that it should be government, it should be private industry, it should be whoever. It really depends on, I guess, where you sit in this space. Me, as a consumer product safety regulator, I would really want to focus in on messages that deal with consumer product safety. A manufacturer that deals with security would probably want to focus in on some messaging around how to make sure that consumers continue to use the product securely. Somebody who's in the privacy space will be talking about privacy. To say that those messages overlap, of course, but I think the first step has to be, like, I think the most successful thing would be to come up with some messaging and some key messages first before you kind of go on to developing the campaign to deliver those messages.
The other thing is, most of our conversation here is on the demand side rather than the supply side. So we have a list of key messages for the people who are, or a list of, not key messages is the wrong word, concepts for key messages for the producers. And it's how do we incentivize, either by carrots or sticks, for them to actually follow through by that. I mean, consumer awareness will encourage people to only buy products that meet these, you know, that do have the labels that we need, but it's also not going to solve the problem completely. And I was actually thinking about where people will turn to. The likelihood is, if you plug in if you buy a toaster at Canadian Tire and something goes wrong with it, you're probably going to go back to Canadian Tire. You're probably not going to go to a library and say, I think there's a problem with my toaster. So perhaps the people we have to engage with that we haven't really engaged with are the people who are selling these things. So the Home Depots, the Canadian Tires, the Best Buys of the world.
I wanted to mention that when I talk about a government-led campaign, of consumer education, it exceeds only, let's say, the IoT devices. When you're talking about issues like understanding how your data is collected, or that if there's an update, ensure that the functionality has not changed, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, you're educating citizens on digital adoption as well. So you're providing a level of education and awareness that exceeds the Canadian Tire that's just very worried that you're not going to return you the device because something that you didn't know. And then most of the devices that you see now come when you open the package says, do not return this to where you bought it, right? If you're basically on your own, if you can get a hold of the manufacturer or whatever. So I wanted to go back to looking at an awareness, a consumer education campaign exceeds just the toaster. It's bringing awareness and education on a whole bunch of issues that are important for society, period, in this digital age. And with the 1-800, like when you say like how passé is that, I have to say that I was registering on a trademark, and the system was not working. I could not pay, and I had to walk to see the people there to ask them if somebody could walk me through it. And then on another occasion, I just phoned to say, look, this is happening, so the person helped me over the phone. So what I'm trying to say is that while it's not exactly the same, to provide somebody with a phone number, even if it's like a person just to triage, is not unthinkable, because you have to, the toaster is just perhaps just a simple example. But all of a sudden, if you don't have, like your husband is an IT expert, and all of a sudden you have a device that's starting to act on you, and you would say, like, I don't know, I don't have where the manual is, and there's a 1-800 number that you're thinking, then somebody perhaps can just guide you. And it's, yes.
Yeah. So I'd just like to pick up on the intermediary idea. I think that's a really good idea, and I think maybe an outcome of this group could be if we could partner and sort of have at least categories of key intermediaries that we would work with. And I think to pick up on the idea, absolutely multi-stakeholder, this is like a very key part of this initiative. Rather than government leading, we want it to be multi-stakeholder. So I think if we could come up with maybe categories of intermediaries, and I think there's certainly community network digital literacy exchanges already. Those are the ones the government is partnering with. So there's across Canada, networks have already established. You've also mentioned I think there is a role for libraries, information points within the sort of municipal setting as well. Where do people go when they are trying to get information? You mentioned on the distribution side, even going to maybe some of the Retail Council, for example, Retail Council of Canada. They've got to reach into thousands and thousands of businesses across Canada. For example, providing key information to the Retail Council that they could then distribute to their membership groups. So maybe not at this exact meeting, but we could put some thought into like the intermediary idea. I think is a very powerful one.
Yes, I wanted to actually speak about the same direction. The role of intermediary are quite important, and if you look at what the electronics stores are doing, they're using labels, they're using QR codes for marketing purposes. So when you buy, for example, printer ink cartridge, you don't have to go to the store retailer or this assistant and ask him, is this suitable for my printer? You can scan the QR code on the package and get all the information about interoperability and which version is suitable for which kind of printer. So we can piggyback on these kinds of initiatives. QR codes are very now used for marketing, for mobile marketing purposes. We can piggyback on this and use these electronic stores as a outlet for information, for education to consumers. The point of developing content and taking the messages further, I think this is very, very important. Certainly this group, the multi-stakeholder group the government is part of, has a role to potentially play into expanding the messages, but it's not an easy task. And hopefully we can get a third party that's professional in marketing campaigns to help with this. We can give the direction, we can give the basic headlines of the messages, but somebody with more marketing background, e-marketing background, can help in making this more consumer acceptable. The role of labels, I think we need to have it in our minds, because this is the direction that we are taking anyway, that the global IoT industry is taking anyway. So we need to prepare the consumer for its availability in hopefully not too distant future. QR codes are already available, so we can mention this and so on. The other types of codes, the CSA codes, are already available for other electrical devices, so we can refresh the minds of consumers that these will be useful and important for you to refer to when you're buying a network-connected device or smart device. We don't have to start from scratch. Already consumers are aware they have to check something when they buy an electric device. We can just expand their horizon of information.
So let's distinguish between consumer education that people need to do before they buy devices, and I think the discussion we've had is very good. In particular, when you're buying new devices, you're not typically in an urgent situation. You're not dealing with a broken toaster or something like this. And people do, at this point, a lot of research sometimes for even the smallest purchases. And I think that's the place to deal with that. On the other side of things, your first indication that your toaster has been compromised will be no internet at your house. Okay? We no internet in your house. You'll have no toast and you'll have no internet. Okay? The reason is because your toaster will have been attacking the internet. Your ISP will have disconnected you. So your first, yes, that's what happens today. Okay? So until we have a smarter home network, home router, and you own one, and the ISPs sell you one, okay, just to point out that the largest ISPs in Canada are 10 to 15 years behind the rest of the world on most of their technology. Okay, so it could be a generation before we get those devices out at this rate. Okay, in other words, the rate has to increase. So your first conversation is going to be with your ISP. Why do I have no internet? Oh, we disconnected you because you were attacking critical infrastructure in, you know, Eastern Seaboard Power Company. What? I wasn't doing that. Well, something in your house was. So that's the point when you perhaps need a 1-800 number. The ISP, what they would like to do at this point is they would like to hand you off to someone else because they don't have the resources or the technical know-how to have a clue what's in your house most of the time. Even though they sold you the router, they usually don't know how to figure out what you've got. But they're in the position right now that they're basically on the hook. If they don't fix your problem, you're basically going to call up another ISP. They're going to then discover you have a broken toaster, and we have 2 ISPs in Canada in most places, and then you're offline. They're both blacklisted you, you're done. You better figure out what's going on. So I think that's the point we have to start from it as far as the recovery point of view. And increasingly there will be more information about what's going on, and I think we need to, on a supply side of things, we need to enable those ISPs to help you better to do what's going on. It says nothing about the research on the demand side, you know, about how we're going to do things, right? We didn't discuss a number of the other supply side. You were mentioning that earlier, campaigns. So we need a campaign to the suppliers to make it clear what they need to do. And unfortunately, I think that's going to have to be mostly in the form of sticks. Sticks, not carrots. Okay? In other words, you won't, your product will be turned back at the border if it does not satisfy this. Okay? And that's the only way I see to deal with, you know, online sellers and this kind of stuff, to that way.
Sorry, I just wanted to pick up on what Pam was mentioning. Definitely work with partners, with intermediaries. Definitely, there's no other way. So you mentioned already that there were a number of points, like of digital literacy and so on. In the past, the government has worked with libraries and community centers, et cetera, et cetera. And please, I totally support the multi-stakeholder process and partnership, but when I'm talking about leading, somebody has to lead. That is, anyway, whatever, going back to that. But so I think that when it says like, what specific tasks need to be accomplished in the next months to implement, or the next 6 months or a year, how could each recommendation be carried out? I believe that somebody was mentioning a proper marketing campaign, that somebody should be tasked to develop the marketing, like the messaging, well, the marketing and communication campaign, that whatever it involves, if it's, you know, proposal for each recommendation, that there should be, we could be provided or work together to identify what are already the points of delivery of these messages, and to do like a scanning of what organizations are already working in those places. So to be able to do this triage or to tag on this message. So, you know, so that is one thing that I would say. And who is best suited and willing to carry out each task? Well, I think that is something that, you know, as Andrew was mentioning, we can't task people that are not in this room. And so I think that doing a scan of the points that are already there and identifying marketing and communications companies, organizations that could do that, and to put a money value to it, because there has to be funding for that, then perhaps if we have the messaging and we identify the outlets, which it already can be rolling.
May I just, because I actually agree with these 2 points that we need, and this actually ties to what Brad was saying, if I captured that correctly, is we need to know what are we communicating. At this point, we have nuances of key messages, but we are not campaign, we are not PR specialists, so we would need to have a campaign specialist, PR folks who know how to message, how to get these videos, how to get these. These are the ones who are going to, at the end, find out what you were asking, how to prioritize, how to simplify, how to tweak it so that it's digestible to the consumers. Do you?
No, I agree, but I think the prioritization has to come from the experts. So I think the experts in the different spaces. So as I said before, we've got privacy, we got security, we got safety, all that overlap, and I think those are that's the expertise we need to tie into to prioritize the messaging. And then, but I absolutely agree that when you're getting into how to deliver the message, I think it could be, and the idea of it being multi-stakeholder, what I was getting at is that I think once you understand the different messages and what different organizations need to deliver those messages most effectively, then that's where it becomes multi-stakeholder, and that's where it could be multifaceted, and having, you know, like as you pointed out, how can we convince manufacturers, right? And there's certain levers that government might have to convince manufacturers to and we're talking about guidance, right? So to provide guidance around their product, there's lots of things that could be done as a product safety organization. What are some of the tools and levers I have that we could use to push some very basic messages that maybe helps the product safety space, maybe helps the security space, maybe helps the privacy space, right? You're looking at things like the different organizations that could deliver those messages, but it really comes down to when we were looking at those messages, they're very cryptic. They're very, in some cases, jargony, right? So agreeing on what are I don't think it can be 15 times 2. Like, can't be 30 key messages. That's not going to work. So it needs to be what are our sort of top 10. And there's been lots of other organizations that have done it in this space. I mean, the UK has a really good example that's been quoted a few times. I really like it. It's very simple and easy to understand. So I think that's what we would need to work towards, be it not duplicating, but something similar. And I think that's where you need to start before you get into who's going to do it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think if that could come out of this process, it has a lot of legitimacy because it's come out of a multi-stakeholder process. So if we can further work on those, if you're saying they're cryptic, and I think the group had done a lot of work trying to make them as easily understandable as possible, but if there's still some work that we need to do, we should do that. And then I think to your point, totally, absolutely agree that then people pick it up and apply it in their own domain, pick it up in their own context. So if you have product safety context, you would apply it in that context, and other people would apply it in whoever they are dealing with. I don't think we can have a one universal sort of mega campaign. I don't think that's going to work. But this will be like, to use the overused phrase, a toolbox. So we've got the key messages we can then draw on and use in our respective contexts. And as I said, it has a lot of legitimacy because it's coming out of this process.
Absolutely, and just to clarify a little bit, because I think the messages too, I think we could probably, as a group of, if we got the right people together, could group them together in certain ways and then identify some specific themes and then the messaging around those themes, because I just don't, it's more the message themselves I don't think would resonate with the average consumer, right? Like, so.
That actually leads to a really good thought, maybe testing the messages. And that could be, that's low cost. This doesn't cost anything really. We could just try to test them even among our colleagues. Just say, when you read these messages, can you understand them? Do they make sense? Like sort of try to see if that actually is communicating what we want it to the average person.
And then perhaps including these messages that were developed and tested into all these other networks or streamlines that already exist, to just build on that. And so to tap into all these areas that already are there, to just provide these messages to be delivered. Yes.
Just to elaborate more on the supply side, talking to manufacturers about what they need to do in order to make their devices more IoT secure and safe. I think it's important that we have a direction of policy or existing best practices that the manufacturer can relate to. And the more standardized it is, the more assured the manufacturer will be. Manufacturer doesn't want to, I come from a Cisco background, so I spent a lot of time with manufacturing side, on the vendor side. There's not an incentive to spend time and money on making device better if there is no actual direction or no actual need, or the market does not require it. So if there's a policy direction or is a competition direction, this will be an incentive for the manufacturer to spend the additional effort, additional money to make the device more compliant, more compliant. A policy direction? Policy direction. Yes. Or standard, an existing standard. Standards are being done in the works, but the policy directions, I think, are coming from other parts of the globe. Having them here as well in Canada would be quite useful.
We in fact have looked at what would be the incentive for the manufacturers instead of just the sticks, as Michael mentioned, is the fact that having the label or having the confidence of the consumer in the product will increase the sales. So kind of the self-regulatory approach instead of having it regulated by a third party or by the government is just seeing that the consumer is confident in a product because it complies with security and safety and privacy measures, that the consumer will adopt these devices. And that's what the incentive would be for the manufacturer.
So I was involved in the UK's IoT Security Foundation. I continue to be involved in there. So the UK regulation, and I think we could simply duplicate it. I think there's lots of advantages of doing exactly what they're doing with no changes other than translate it to French. We're not a big enough market to do something unique. But so one of the working groups came out with a set of voluntary yes. Okay. And thank you. And they're pretty good. And I was involved in a group that was looking at producing a IoT SF label. Pushback was that essentially European labs, CL, CSA, UL, they all want to do this. They have no idea what to certify, but they want to be the ones doing it. So basically the relationship is that they are going to be doing the evaluation and we are providing the criteria for the evaluation. So in the end, it's their label and their stuff, but our standard. Okay, and so that's happening right now, whether we do anything with that or not. Are manufacturers going to do this? No. Only way it's going to happen in the UK is that government procurement is going to demand that label. Okay, I don't think there's any feel good from the manufacturer. Doesn't matter. They already think they're doing that. If they're a good manufacturer, and if they're a poor manufacturer, they already don't care. That's why I care about the consumer education, because we have to reach around the manufacturer and we have to say, look, this is a national security issue. If you buy crap, we're going to have a problem, okay? And you're going to be offline, okay, to the consumer. And they've got to vote. They've got to vote with their wallet, and the only way they can know what they're going to vote for is to have a label of some kind to see what's going on.
You were mentioning one of the recommendations was to bring awareness that the devices are from respectable, certified, etc. manufacturers. So that will tie into now what you were mentioning, that the manufacturer now will want to, or if he wants to sell his products, like to be able to have this certification or information or whatever, and if he's crappy, he doesn't care anywhere. So
that's what they're calling it also, the
voluntary approach, yeah. And one of the reasons to make it voluntary is that there are some very good situations and circumstances where it's impractical to do something, to do what's there. There are a lot of scenarios that are not consumer scenarios where, you know what, this is the right thing to do. It's to violate the thing. So mandatory thing has a government regulation and seldom is flexible enough for the way the speed the industry moves. But a great deal of consumer stuff does not need to be that flexible.
I have a question for all of us. Where do you think the money will come to do these things? Do we need money?
That's $1 million question.
I think I'm confused about the way forward. Like, is there a critical path? Like, does ISOC have a timeline or stages in the consultation process to take this anywhere? I guess that's a question for you, Sally. Or is it mostly open to us? Okay. So I think from what I've heard is first look at the list that we've just made and clarify it so that it's more understandable, and then would go to maybe ISOC is more well positioned to go to various internet governance fora to get buy-in from the different stakeholders, like the tech companies or manufacturers, because we had outlined a list of their responsibilities as well to communicate to consumers, not just consumer awareness, educate yourself sort of thing. There's some responsibility from the manufacturer as well. But if you said that the UK has already done most of this work already, then maybe we don't need to do all those steps again. So maybe evaluate their framework, I guess, would be my preferred option.
Yeah, regarding who does what, I think from the multi-stakeholder group is composed of government, academia, experts, technical savvy people. So everybody in his sphere has a point of contact with some other stakeholders. If you know the manufacturers, you can approach them and you can convince them what's going on. And you can relate what's going on also not only in Canada, but in other parts of the world. I think this could be convincing. Assuming ISOC will take the lead on everything, I don't think that this is practical. Where the money comes from, I think this is a good question, and that's something that will be considered, I believe, as things move along. But the campaign as such is marketing awareness campaign is in different phases and different scales, different demographies. I think this is something that will need to happen. But as the work has been done over the last year, the experts engaged. Everyone has a sphere of knowledge, sphere of interest, sphere of contacts, and these have been leveraged to bring this work together. I think this will continue. So if you have access to manufacturers, if you have access to ISPs, if you have access to other parts of the ecosystem, you can leverage your contacts, your links, and bring them to know what's going on and how they can collaborate.
So informally.
No, and formally it goes without saying. This is without saying. But I think the direction or the requirement is to have specific tasks that need to be done by specific people.
Now, you were mentioning, I don't have a mic, but I'm going to talk loud there, but you were mentioning about to have experts develop the messaging and campaign, right? That's an experts have to, right? Experts, right, but there's somebody has to, an expert has to develop the you know, if they're going to do a video or they're going to do whatever.
Different steps. So the messages are the text that needs to be conveyed, and then how to convey it is somebody else that does this.
It doesn't. Yes, the technicality, but I'm saying that there's money required to do that. Okay, so my question is, where does the money come from?
I think what's interesting is that what we see here is numerous different groups working on the same issue from a different perspective, whether it be from product safety or security, privacy. And maybe something that's really useful out of this is that we're identifying the contacts of who we might be able to piggyback off each other's efforts. So, you know, if Health Canada is putting something out in the future on device safety for health products or something, or, you know, consumer product, you know, then other groups that are in this you know, multi-stakeholder forum can be made aware, and we can leverage each other's work and maybe put something, cobble something together based on what's already been done to circumvent this need to additional funding. If someone's already, you know, got a public campaign out there, and, you know, let's say the privacy regulator has a guideline coming out, we can cobble something together and put out a communication. This kind of effort where it's a bit more compartmentalized, there's a lead on each issue, you know, it's already work that's being undertaken. So it's a matter of just joining each other's efforts.
While in principle I understand it, practically, like if we said, okay, now next week we just do the campaign, like, so who, you know, so it's very, I find it a challenge. I don't know where it's going to come from. Yes, I was wondering, I'm asking the table, where is the money going to come from to advance some of these issues? And
well, that's what I'm trying to say, is that, you know, if each department is working on their own thing, there's already likely some sort of funding for, you know, disseminating your product. So the nice thing is that we piggyback on each other's efforts and put things out maybe on a similar timeline where we have that consumer safety product out, we have the security standard out, we have a privacy product out, and this is the sort of forum that brings these people together and voices and to find out what's going on and who's working on what.
So would a scan or some sort of recollection or identification of who's doing what when would help? Perhaps there's an opportunity not to reinvent the wheel, or to people that are already in one direction to be able to refocus or include some of this other messaging. Then there'd have to be an effort just in bringing those things together or identifying them, right? Mm-hmm. Because some people had difficulty even finding this meeting. So
right, no, and these are good points. Logistics are always difficult. Like who, you know, we have listservs in academia that serve that purpose. I am on many listservs to find out what's happening in the world of privacy, and so, you know, it's a matter of maybe you know, the wonderful efforts of the group that spearheaded this forum to create a listserv, and we put out information to the parties that are that have a relevant need to know this information, and we, you know, disseminate what the work is being done in our own fields. It's like, you know, that's what we do already with listservs. I don't know. I mean, there's not.
Right. But I as a project expert and just looking at the implementation, and they want us to do concrete stuff. I'm just being like the devil's advocate in a way. Because I'm saying that's okay for academia, but when you have, here it's saying, what tasks need to be accomplished in the next month, the next 6-month, year. Like, so it basically, I'm just wondering, we come out of this meeting today, and what happens in the next month, so some of these things are in place. That's just my question.
I can't speak to the product that's being developed in this group, but in terms of concrete measures that can happen after this sort of meetup, I think knowing who are key parties that are working on this issue is vital. Whether it be we all continue to work in silos and push our own products out, you know, this forum allows for at least putting a face to who's working on what, you know. So I can't speak to the product of this group. But.
Just to pick up on what you're saying, though, would it be useful, I think what I'm hearing you say is to keep a network going after this project. I think it doesn't really stop, but it sort of goes into a next phase. So a concrete outcome could be to have a network of people here and others that we could see to invite to do what you're saying. That's sort of like an inventory or a dynamic fora in which whatever campaigns or information sharing each of us do in our own respective roles, we would share and everyone would be knowledgeable about, and then we could try to add into that the key messages that we will have been honing for the IoT. So if you're from the OPC, so if you do privacy-related outreach, then you could piggyback on that with some IoT specifics.
And knowing who's kind of doing what, sharing of whatever going on, I would be keen to then how our group and our work can complement or, you know, how we can join on each other's communications campaigns to disseminate the message across, that kind of thing.
And within the kind of the federal family, at least, Health Canada, because we've been doing some work through the OECD Working Party on Consumer Product Safety, who's interested in this area, we have developed a kind of a network of regulators that are working in this space. So Privacy Commissioner has been communicating to, because I think that, I think having that network and again, going back to the idea of maybe the most effective thing that comes out of this would be those, what are the kind of key, maybe we can call them broad themes that need to be communicated out, and then figuring out how the different areas can do it, because I think regulators probably have a very different interest in how and why and where we would communicate it, and the types of messages that we may want to focus in on, whereas again on the consumers and versus the manufacturers. So I can certainly make sure that you're in the loop on the network we've developed on the regulatory space, but possibly having that multi-stakeholder network, because I think getting the messaging right is the most important thing, and then understanding how we kind of push it out. That's a very different problem, and I think that's multi-pronged, and I think that's where we would need a variety of different stakeholders to step up, and like probably all the different people that are in this room, right? So that would be my suggestion.
I can provide you an audience of undergraduate and graduate students through the University of Toronto next year, if this is helpful, to even test out messaging. Thinking of, undergraduate students, a new BI in information, and that's starting up. Teaching a class in information and power, and I'm teaching courses on privacy special topics in the winter. And so it could be the messaging of, and or the design of all of these things. So I seriously can set that up.
What kind of background are the students that you...
The students are coming from, master's students come from a variety of humanities and social sciences and technical backgrounds. So it's going to be quite interdisciplinary. So they're not necessarily coming from a purely technical aspect.
Because that's interesting too, but also the idea of getting into the curriculum in universities as well, like the idea of safer by design and secure by design.
I can do that when I design the course that I'm teaching in the winter in particular, and I'm teaching another course on human-centered. We have a new concentration on human-centered design, and I'm doing the cranky course about ethics and values and things like that. So I'm more than happy to be able and try to facilitate something like this, and to be able and build that into some of the curriculum and have.
That's a great idea. That's a really
no
good
doubt.
What I'm also is that while this is a one of, if there is a two-pager or whatever it is that we develop as the messaging, then to be able to build on that and to propose it to universities and to libraries and to, as this is what something you might want to offer to your,
I can bring this into Kathleen Schaefer and
whatever your constituents.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do that.
I know at Consumers Affairs, what we are hoping for is for this report to be refined, the messages to be refined, at least according to what we had today, and then to be able to share it. We have a website that we would like to share this report at its final stage. And the key messages just on our portal, perhaps maybe if we get the approvals to get it also through our social media. We don't know that yet. I cannot speak to that. It has to be approved from above. That's above my pay grade. But we are looking at a way to incorporate this report in our website somehow. But the maintenance and that's a different issue, and that's...
I know. Yeah. So then this is when I was saying, like, sometimes, I mean, I know that we want to, either it's a stakeholder that leads it or whatever, but suppose that the messages with whatever comics or graphics or whatever, like the cream messages are somewhere. And then your issue is linking them. Everybody links to that page and is updated. So yes, there's an issue. So then everybody can link to the same, can link to the page, can link to that. And so then it's going to be disseminated and somebody updates it. But, well, that's when I say government-led. It's that it's going to be somebody that has to identify.
It's an election year too.
Could I just follow up a bit on the academic side in the university? Because you offered a very, I think, very tantalizing idea. So how would you then engage other colleagues, or how would you go beyond U of T? You're at U of T?
I'm at U of T.
Yeah.
Probably through some of the research groups that I'm a part of, and just sort of the formal and informal networks that I have. And I might start more locally within the GTA, but also, Ottawa. Yeah, I could see how I could spread this out, yeah. Oh, for sure. Canadian Communication Association. Canadian Communication Association, and I'm also editing the policy portal, the Canadian Journal of Communication, and so I'm seeing an issue that could be about IoT that I develop in the near future.
Do you mind if you write me down your contact and what you just, so I can contact you?
I'm on leave now, that's why I'm here.
Consumer Affairs. So then Consumer Affairs has business networks and a whole bunch of consumer networks already.
But we are not leading this. This report is finalized. There could be.
Turn you to academia.
So, but then you just absolutely.
I don't want to cut anybody off, but I just wanted to propose a talking point or question. I'm hearing a lot of great goals here and a desire to want to keep working together and building capacity within the expertise that's in a room and towards achieving these goals. Is there potentially an interest in creating an action committee going forward? Maybe it's among this group, maybe it's expanding the group to oversee the achievement of some of these goals.
Led by?
Convene. Let's use convene. Because I think we're getting stuck on the lead.
Well, I know. Okay, convene by.
I didn't bring cards.
Convene by.
Kim.
No.
Convene by Kim.
I mean, certainly Internet Society will be promoting the report going forward and the recommendations from the report going forward, but in terms of what these final recommendations look like and whether there's people volunteering to oversee further implementation, that's what I'm wondering if there's an interest in.
I think that there is an interest, and this is why I think that who convenes or who publishes is key, because when you want to go talk to your manufacturers, is it you personally, or is it like the big back of whoever convened that now decided this and the multi-stakeholder, la la la, and then that's a different strength of the message, right? So what I'm trying to say is that if everybody, while I believe and I promote and I teach multi-stakeholder engagement, and I'm a strong supporter of that, the convener has to exist, because otherwise it's anarchy, and then everybody runs and nothing is, there's no really concrete steps. So that is why. So that's why I'm saying who's going to convene.
Right. And we are lacking the right people at the table. Standards Council of Canada comes to mind. They're just completely AWOL.
Standards Council.
The Standards Council of Canada. They're completely AWOL as far as I'm concerned. They've been AWOL for more than a decade in the tech space. Okay, AWOL. They're just not there. Okay. But that's the kind of the federal mandate where I would expect the mandate to come through, but it's not going to happen, right? So who else is there? So who's at the table is the point. And I agree. We don't have a group, and we don't have someone here that can lead this. And so I like the idea that we could convene a forum in which we could seek to invite that, identify that lead, because we don't have a lead here, and so we need to convene a forum to find the lead. That's the concrete step I can see us doing. Standards Council of Canada.
So what do we send Ruba to report on these questions for discussion? Do you have enough stuff?
I have enough. Actually, I have 7 points.
Excellent. Do you have our contact information? We will be tasked with engaging them.
Well, for sure, I have yours. May I also have yours? Can I have one of these 2 cards?
Does everybody have a sheet of paper or something that can? Does anybody have a?
I would also say, while we're just having this, the convener role, it might make sense to have some overlap with the other 2 working groups, because if the ISOC project was a year, and they're not vacating the space, but I don't know how active the plan is to be in a year. So you don't want these 3 things to hurtle out in opposite directions. So I can't speak for them, but I would think that CIRA would make quite a sensible place for more than one of these places to be convened.
Already convened. The network resilience.
Yeah. So network.
Because they're quasi. They're not really government.
But they're trusted. They're not.
Quasi.
Yeah.
They're heavily supported. It's the government solution or choice that they're like arm's length, but they're kind of.
I don't think they're very good for a public outreach.
But this would be a different mandate.
Yeah.
I don't think they have that role now.
I don't
actually
speak
think
for them
that
at all.
I believe also that the working group that is working on labeling is very interested in getting the message.
Yeah.
Yes, so perhaps it's through that. Yes.
Right.
Because consumer education awareness could be part of the labeling. Exactly.
Consumers to be aware that labels are coming and how to make use of things. So they are interlinked.
And just an idea about the convener, does there have to be one convener, or can it be a joint convening?
Convening, we've used the word convening to remove any responsibility as lead. So it could be as many people as you like.
Can be multiple co-conveners.
Yeah.
I personally believe that if you want to have one umbrella, while it could be a few, you can't make it an anarchist. We're not talking about that they have to do the things. We're just talking about the convener, in my mind, right? It's.
I just say that for this whole process, we had multiple. ISOC played a very instrumental role, but the steering committee or the convening was by 5 different.
But I would say
parties.
there was.
Okay.
There's one who takes on.
I don't know if this is working. No, it seems not to be. Ah, there we go.
Yes.
So we're gonna wind up these breakout sessions, and maybe what I can do is invite people from from each table to come and talk a little bit about what what the outcomes were.
Sorry, what's your name? Leslie. Leslie, why don't you turn off the mic now that, because we have.
Well, we should steal one microphone back. Okay, so I think there are three things that that we want to get out of this this session. The first thing is, you know, what each group determined, you know, who was going to do the things and what the next steps were. But the other thing we want to get out of this is commonalities across here. So how does this get stitched together so that we have an overall strategy? That's the remaining piece that we've got to put together today. And I think that what we're doing is we're trying, you know, at the low level, the individual pieces, but we also have to have a story about how all the parts fit, hang together. So we'll do that in this discussion. So why don't we start? And
from our group, we had really interesting 7 kind of methods, visions of how we can move forward. So the first one was we have now some key messages or nuances of key messages that we need to prioritize in order to find what are the most important key messages by experts. Let's say we'll have 10 key messages that we'll focus on. They will be also looked at in terms of themes, major themes, and then to be tested, whether by colleagues or by, we were offered a very interesting opportunity by a professor from the University of Toronto to volunteer some of her students to test these key messages on. So that will be very interesting. Professor Leslie Shade, so I have her contact, and that's one concrete step forward. The second was to make afterwards categories of the intermediaries. One point that was brought up that we need to have a scan, environmental scan of who are the intermediaries, who are working on consumer education and awareness, and to categorize them to see if we can leverage some of their expertise and how we can engage with them. The third one was to maintain the multi-stakeholder approach because we see the value of having this multi-stakeholder approach as it gives more legitimacy to any of the key messages that will come out of this process. The fourth one is to scan what is already there in terms of marketing expertise and who would be, for example, interested, that's in the future, after we have categorized the key messages who are out there as intermediaries. We are not the experts on the PR and the key messages. So one other option as well that was suggested is to look at the UK and what they have been doing, because apparently they have worked a lot and extensively on some of these key messages that we can also benefit from. What we are also noticing is that there is not really one we cannot really see it as a one universal campaign, but a multiplicity of small efforts of all of us coming together within our own sectors, domains, and to put all these, as you called it, to stitch it together in a way that will benefit our own particular sectors and approaches and consumers. And also to talk to manufacturers on the best practices to make use, for example, of incentivizing them into sharing these approaches, key messages, perhaps even within the retailers and stores. Working together, and the main important thing is to have a network, to maintain a network of people, like in this forum, for example, to be able to move forward and to have a dynamic conversation about where each of us is on this IoT project.
So thank you very much. One question that I have is, I heard you say on several occasions, we, and I want to make sure that I know who we is, because
the group that we were discussing.
Okay, so you're all signed up for that? Is that what I'm hearing? No. See, if I see a shoulder shrug, that's not a sign of signing up.
No, I think the signing up was that I think there was a feeling of momentum and wanting to continue discussions and having a network of people to continue to work on these issues. So I think that is signing up, yes. I don't think anybody said that there would be one party that would be leading or convening or taking all the responsibility, but it was more a willingness to continue the conversation and to continue to see where respectively each of the people and these different stakeholder groups, what are they doing, sharing information, having the messages to be made available in each of our different roles and areas of action.
So I'm being a real engineer here, right? The way we do this is, like, for instance, I heard the suggestion. What we've got to do is contact the manufacturers. So who is going to contact?
You didn't say contact the manufacturer. Perhaps involve the manufacturers in the future in best practices by incentivizing them to see the value of this, but on a voluntary basis.
Yeah, I mean, it's the internet. You can't force anybody to do anything. But I want to make sure that if what we're saying is this is a thing that we want to do, somebody has to say, oh, I will go and contact this person and try to get them to come. And so, I mean, maybe that's a thing that the group needs to continue working on in its list and its own communications. But this is a super important part of this is concrete action. Concrete action means you literally do the thing, and that's a really critical part of this. If we're going to have the effects that we want, we have to make sure that we actually do, and that's dear to my heart. That action.
The thing that we really came up with this was to have a network and to continue this discussion. And to keep the momentum going on having this kind of discussion on IoT, and we find it very useful to have
Good.
So, check. Thanks. Okay, so actually the labeling breakout discussion also had some ideas on the consumer education and awareness. There was mention of an implementation group being formed. Thank you, Jacques. You would have been wearing that. So there was discussion of an implementation group being formed, and for us, that's very much focused on the consumer education piece, mainly being kind of a platform. When I say platform, a mailing list or the Slack channel, where the different, as you mentioned, the we can gather, the folks who are actually doing campaigns. So that includes folks that we've already dealt with, including Open Media, Option Consommateur, and then there's also, we had IEEE Canada, reference all of the different chapter groups they have, and if they're able to, communicate via this list saying, hey, we're looking for topics, then this platform can be a way in which we can feed in those messages. Same with the ISOC chapters and any other, I mean, you leave it open that anyone who wants to work on this issue has like a ready resource of not just content, but expertise to draw from for whatever specific angle they would like to address. And a specific angle that we definitely think is one that should be addressed is the labeling component. So how exactly that would be conducted, that can be essentially one brought to that implementation group of saying, for those who are interested in pursuing consumer education on this issue, we definitely see an important labeling piece to that and can, I think filter the content that we came up with in this initiative. So that was our comments on your piece, but you guys did a great job, and there's definitely a lot of interest in kind of working with that content that we have. On the labeling piece, my notes have died, but it's really two pieces. It's very different than the consumer education and awareness piece, because if we don't do anything on consumer education and awareness, nothing will get done. different initiatives will kind of undertake their own educational campaigns, but that's very different than labeling, which will continue, or sorry, not labeling, but standards, which will continue. So the two main fora, or I guess the two main ways that we can think about it, there's the work going on domestically on the national standard, the T200, and so what we're writing as far as our notes that we can feed into the report is a matrix on if you want to get involved in the T200 work, what are the fora that you can get involved in. And then on the international side, if you want to get involved in the relevant ISO standard on this, where are the fora that you can get involved? And, thankfully it actually goes to the CSA Mirror Committee for the relevant ISO group working on this. And they actually have their own cyber committee that deals with both the national standard and feeds up that work to the international level, as well as provides a mechanism for anyone who is interested and wants to contribute to this work to participate directly in that international work without having to travel all across the world. So this is really useful, and this is a valuable resource that we can provide to the WHO. The WHO in this case is, as you said, Andrew, we're not telling people, we're not obligating vendors to participate, but this would be something that we would see vendors wanting to participate. But as far as who we're kind of directing or who we're encouraging to participate in this cyber committee includes, security experts, any smaller vendors that just don't know where necessarily to engage in this, as well as consultants. We also heard from the Canadian Internet Governance Forum panel on IoT that civil society organizations were very interested, but obviously resource constrained. So by us pointing to this committee that they can get involved in is a more economical way for them to add the consumer lens to these standards discussion. And also I think in our report we can identify the important role for government. There's currently only the Office of the Privacy Commissioner really involved in the ISO conversations. And so we can put the flag there for folks from my department at ISED and Health Canada who's interested to get involved in this CSA committee so they can relay more of the public policy considerations around enforcement and how the standards work may kind of work with existing policies as well. So that table is one thing that I think we can readily provide, and in it we also flagged where, for instance, when it comes to the IETF, we would just point to the network resilience recommendations because we see them as being kind of the technical implementation of the work going on the standard side. And we also pointed to the consumer education piece as one that we could leverage to, show people what the standards work is about. When CIRA comes out with a proof of concept and a YouTube video on the implementation of these standards, they can reflect that as well in a consumer education environment.
This is on. There we are. This is good. There are three themes that I want to pick up here, and I think they're all important ones. One is that there's a sort of clearinghouse of information function here that you're talking about. And one of the things that we asked about before is, if people aren't in the room, how do we get them motivated in this? But what I'm hearing implicit in what you're saying, I think, and this is probably true, is that lots of people are already incented right? The incentives are already there because everybody's interested in this problem. There's lots of people who are interested in it. What they don't have is the knowledge about how to put these things together. So in fact, simply providing the information may be enough to get people involved, and that's an interesting point. But the other theme that I heard there was a lot of coordination across these groups, that what you were saying was, there's a big piece that needs to be coordinated with consumer education in order to understand what this label is and how it's useful and so on. So that's an emerging piece of work that needs to happen, and we need to identify who's going to do that coordination. Presumably there's somebody who's paying attention to both of these things, but I mean, it would be good to identify who that is. And similarly, in the other direction, it sounded like there was a lot of stuff around network resiliency and how that ties together and how the standards communities, because there are multiple standards. I know we're not supposed to say this, but you know, not all of the standards development organizations get along all the time, and so somebody needs to provide some coordination there, and I think that's a valuable observation.
Okay, so from the Network Resiliency Group, the current document provides it's important to note that the current document provides a set of recommendation and best practice for today's gateway. So today's implementers of home gateways, we made recommendation for the current state to protect the current infrastructure. So one thing we're going to do is we're going to change the recommendation because it didn't address the secure home gateway work that we're doing today. So the main recommendation that we're going to add is that the goal in a certain time frame from now is for reference model implementation of home gateway. So the future home gateway reference model includes the secure home gateway framework inside the core software. So that in 2 years from now, for example, if somebody downloads OpenWRT or other home gateway software, the open source version of it, it comes with all the security feature that we're building today for the next year. So the goal is for so that's it. So we want the future home gateway to be secure right off the bat when it's downloaded from the internet. And for other vendors to implement the same security framework. So I think that's the main change that we have in the recommendation. We're going to look at trying to figure out, in collaboration with other stakeholders in Canada, how do we get the Canadian Cyber Centre to recommend or define new guidelines that would get the telco in Canada to supply gateways or support gateways that have the secure home framework in place. I think that's important. So if we're going to do all this work to define something more secure for the home, the people implementing them, the telcos and the ISPs, should be highly recommended to provide the new gateways. So we're going to work with them on that. And then we're going to also define what standards that we want to be, like which feature that we want to standardize. So one goal that we looked at is to set a time frame for defining when we're going to have standard for device quarantining, to unquarantine a device, for onboarding of the gateway themselves in a secure manner, and for IoT onboarding and management. So we want to have standard APIs and documentation for these things so that people can build their own implementation of secure home gateways, and they all interoperate together. So I think those are the main things that we're going to change in the final report.
So there are a couple of actions there that I think are really interesting. One of them has to do with getting certain features into people's code bases. And so in the case of the OpenWRT, you know, we know who the maintainers are. What do we think we can do to make that incentive positive for them so that they're going to embrace it? Do you have ideas about that, or is that still to be developed?
Well, we're talking with, for example, Purple WRT, which is one implementation of OpenWRT for some telco home gateway products that they use, and they're interested in adding this framework within their environment because, I think from a business point of view, if the gateway is more secure, it makes less. You have the ISP, so the less phone call an ISP have, the better for the margin. So this framework actually prevents calls coming in, so there's some economic value for them on that side. So when we use this angle to talk to ISPs and telco, we get more traction and communication with them. So there's some value.
And I mean, so this is something I just don't know, but it occurs to me that from the point of view of an ISP, it's sort of critical that they have remote management capabilities on these devices for their customers. So is that one of the pieces that still needs to be developed, or is that part of the specification that you were talking about? Because there is this other piece, the specification work that needs to happen.
So, well, for the telco to manage the home gateway, that's already done.
Right.
We don't need to focus on that. We're
Good.
just focusing on the IoT onboarding and also on the home gateway onboarding.
Mm-hmm.
So the challenge that we did, it's a chicken and egg. So the more security you want to put inside the home gateway, it makes the administration of the gateway more complex for the user. So in addition to building security on the home gateway, you have to build an application framework that makes it super easy for the user to manage a complex security. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So because you do something more complicated in the home gateway, we need to have a standard definition on the application side to make the provisioning work and all that. So it's changing the way, it's going to change the way people use home gateways in the future. And that's one thing we need. So changing human beings is the hardest thing. This is going to change the way people work on their home gateway. So adoption is, we need to, I guess, communication and outreach. We need to make sure that this is good for a user and it's a new way of doing things, and we need to adopt that with, that should be communicated, part of the communication plan.
One of the things that we've seen more than once is that we get positive security developments when you get performance or ease of use improvements, right? So we see that TLS 1.3, for instance, is getting deployed everywhere. Why? Because it's being shipped with new browsers. The new browsers go faster, and so people get faster downloads, and so you get more deployment. And so one of the pieces here is this usability part that you were just talking about, that if the user interfaces are easier to use than the existing gateways, and it would be like not hard to make that improvement, then we could get a positive deployment story there.
Well, it is, because every time we talk to people, and then we say, well, by default, so we don't want passwords on the home gateway anymore, so we get rid of that. So we build a new way of, we're building a new way of trusting the home gateway and the app to work together. And then the next thing is, every time a device is added to your home network, the Wi-Fi, you need the home user, the home admin, has to say, this device wants to connect, and you want to give it access. But the usability is, okay, but this is my kid's iPad that's connecting, and then the app says, well, maybe you want to have parental control. You just want to give it access to something, safe search. So now you can provision certain policy based on the home computers that you have when we implement this framework, and that gives way more control. Instead of having everything wide open, it's easy by device to set up a policy and control exactly what kids can have access to and all of that. So it's going to open up some, hopefully, new doors for innovation.
So we've been talking a little bit now about these individual pieces and how they individually have to work, who's going to do these things. And I think we've got some sort of nascent ideas about who's going to do some of these things, but it's not, we're not fully there, but that's okay, because you don't know until you try. But now there's this other question about this sort of overarching thing. How do these pieces fit together? Are there gaps in the way that they fit together? Are we hearing those gaps? Does everybody, or does everybody think, like everybody in the room, you all think that, apparently I'm spending time in Virginia, that you know that there are these individual pieces, but does everybody feel that these parts are working together, or are there gaps in the way that they're working together, or are there pieces that we need to knit together? I'll play, oh, okay.
Hey, thanks. I do think we have a beautiful package together that put a lot of the niches together. And I think we would do ourselves a favor if we show the coherence between those even better than we do so far, both for the individual groups in aiming their contributions as for us to build on. I think one of the unique aspects of the Canadian process has been also to put the labels in a way as a unifying thing in the middle between how you support awareness raising and how do you make technical support of all this possible. And by clearly identifying the focus, as we've done on the overall theme, which is helping consumers make smarter choices, but also helping them to manage their networks better, my recommendation would be to put something on top that says, this is what's really important. People need to be aware, need to make choices, and we need to help them to make that doable by home network technologies, by labels that help them, but also help technology to auto-configure that kind of stuff. And the awareness that part of this will be trusted and part of this will not be to be trusted. So you have also different level of thingies. So I think putting that coherent picture on will leverage the whole thing we have. I don't think we miss any specifics, although in the document itself I've seen the lack of alignment in that some tables in some sections refer to different things than other things, but that's easily solved.
So this coherence thing that you were talking about at the beginning, it sounds to be like you're saying that somebody needs to write that text. Do we know who? My experience generally is that when somebody says someone should do something about this, the problem is inevitably that I need somebody, and very often the person who shows up is nobody, and so what I need is the somebody. Who's going to do that drafting? I am not. There's not enough space in airplanes for me to keep my laptop open. So we need somebody, and maybe this is something for the Internet Society to identify. I don't know. Mark is kind of nodding, I think. Okay. Okay, so now we have a volunteer. Good. Is that it? That's all we got to do? The Internet Society shows up and writes some text and you're all happy? Because if you're all going to make my life that easy all the time, I'm just going to volunteer Mark to do everything.
So
but Mark may be volunteering you.
That's all right.
I volunteer to provide feedback on Mark's work.
Oh, good.
So one thing that talking about what we can do to make this work better. So one thing we're doing is we're actually writing codes. We're defining standards. We have people behind desks typing, and a lot of this costs money. So one thing I started to do is start to ask for funding, help to make this work better. ISOC donated 10K. The more money we get, the more developers that we can hire to actually build running code and define standards. So if there's any way you can donate, you all have my email address. That would be, we have funding for about 6 months of work. And after that, I have no clue, it ends. The light at the end of the tunnel is going to be shut off. So if we want to keep for another year, then funding is going to be useful.
I think Jacques is making an important point here. If you actually need a standards development effort to make, for instance, these interoperable pieces work so that all of the gateways in the world do this stuff properly, we're going to need to find a way to fund that activity. The standards don't write themselves, and they're not typically a 6-month project. It's very hard to get the internet to agree to things in 6 months. That's generally a bad plan. So I think this is an important point, that we need resources on this, and it's money or time. I mean, these things are sort of fungible, but we've either got to get people working on it, or we have to find somebody to pay to do that work. One way or the other, that's a critical part. So now we have identified a thing that needs to happen, and we haven't identified people with open wallets. So this may be a task that we all have to take, that we're going to go back to wherever we go back to, and start beating the bushes for contributions to this kind of effort in order to make sure that that's there. And we had this this observation that there were that there were vendors that we needed to engage with. They seem like an obvious source of this kind of thing because it's their stuff that's going to ship. And now the question is, can we get the incentives aligned correctly so that the vendors don't decide that it's better to keep their stuff closed and proprietary than it is to have a standard thing that works across all of the systems. So I think that that's an area that we want to probably spend some intellectual cycles on.
So I hear some great next steps from each of the individual groups, and we want to have some language around coordination, but I suppose I don't understand what the Internet Society's vision for this group going forward is, if there's going to be continued coordination, if the steering committee will still loosely stay together and we'll have some accountability, like each of the groups will be accountable to still a core group in this process. I was wondering if you could shed some light on that, or if there's any plan for that.
The nice thing about having staff is you can kick it to them. So I think Mark is leading this project from our point of view, so I'm going to hand it to him.
So yeah, we have the oversight committee, which is CIRA, CANARIE, CIPPIC, and ISOC, others. And I do see that committee continuing. Ideally, and this is kind of my pitch right now, I would like to see an implementation working group form from the group that's in this room. People would self-identify to participate on a working group or a task force or whatever we decide to call it down the road, to both identify areas for implementation of the recommendations and carry those out, promote the use of the recommendations, but also provide a bit of an oversight function or an evaluation function. So in 3 months on the low-hanging fruit, which is a phrase I hate, but on the low-hanging fruit recommendations, are they done? 6 months, where are we with this? Where do we need some resources to ensure that the recommendations are taken up? So that's my pitch. I mean, we're all in this room and we've been participating for a year. My greatest fear would be that year of work goes and sits on a shelf somewhere. And you know, it's the Internet Society can do what it can do to really move this forward. But I think it's incumbent on everyone who's been in this process for a year to really take up the reins and beyond and so far ill-defined implementation working group.
So what I'm hearing from Mark is a request for volunteers. Seeing at least one hand up. Oh, there we go. And the floodgates open.
If your hand's up, because I'm going to write your names down.
Did you get them all? Okay.
If you think I missed you, or if you think about this more and then decide that you want to participate, then come find me. I think, like Mark was saying, and I'll take this opportunity to talk since I'm the mic passer, but this is a multi-stakeholder issue. It can't just be an ISOC thing anymore. You know, we've had this incredible oversight committee that's doing great work, but for this to actually work, for all of these incredible recommendations that you all have come up with to actually work, all the stakeholders that we've engaged in this whole process have to be committed to doing the things. So as many people as are willing to participate and actively participate on that implementation working group, it would be a huge, huge tribute to this group. Great.
So another thing that the Internet Society is doing, I'm going to toot our horn a little bit here. We have a partnership with Consumers International, and one of the things that we've done there is a little bit of study already on this sort of understanding of consumers and the security work and so on. And the idea here is that we're going to spend the next year, collaborating with them, trying to get some consumer awareness about, you know, security practices and so on. And then we will study again to see whether this made any dent at all. One of the serious problems that we've had traditionally, I think, is that we don't really have a clear picture of what people do and do not know. And so we're trying to understand that in order to you know, have some baseline of knowledge about you know, what things work or do not work. At least we will know, well, if we tried this and it made no difference whatsoever in consumer understanding of the situation, then we know, well, that one doesn't work. Hopefully, I am, you know, modestly hopeful that that what we will do is we'll find that we actually make a difference in consumer understanding of these things. One of the problems that the Internet Society has, of course, is that, you know, we know how to talk to people who are interested in the internet, and we know how to talk to nerds and so on, but the sort of general consumer market is not really our area of expertise. So that's the reason that we're partnering with a consumer group to try to understand what happens there. Because I certainly, I mean, I am a consumer, but that's about all I understand about consumers. They're a worldwide association, so. The survey that they so they're actually performing this for us. We're out of the loop on the performance of it. We were involved in the design and so on. But my understanding is their goal is a global audience. And obviously then we break it down sort of, you know, by geography and by market segments and a bunch of other things. All right. Well, I see that lunchish things are arriving. And I detect a certain declining of energy and so on in the room. So I want to thank all of you and all of our panelists here for this good collaboration today, and for your collaboration over this year. It's been, from my point of view, this is the kind of thing that is always a good sign when people get together and they say, we're going to do these things. One of the things that I've noticed on many occasions on the internet is that from time to time people will say, you know, I'm going to do this thing, and it turns out that you can't do it alone because, you know, you need everybody else to come along. So this is an example of us working together, and I think that that's a good sign. It puts us in a position to make a good difference on the internet. So thank you all. With that, I guess I'll open the floor for lunch, or maybe Mark has something more to say.
Perfect. Hi, my name is Walter, and I'm a co-founder of the IoT 613 conference. It's an Internet of Things conference just 3 short weeks away. So I'm here to invite you to come and join us. It's 2 days. The first day is a series of workshops on business of IoT, development, and UX. There will be an interesting session in the development workshop on capture the flag, learning how to attack IoT devices. The second day will be a series of talks on networks, cybersecurity, session on precision agriculture, and something we call You and Me in the Age of IoT. And that's all about how IoT changes human behavior. So for example, Interact's coming in, they're monetizing the value of IoT data. And then by monetizing that data, such as credits from solar panels, they change human behavior in terms of how they use energy. So please come and join us. Lots of great speakers, sponsors. And just to sweeten the pot, there's a discount code, ISOC IoT. It's 10% off for 20 tickets. Thank you very much, and enjoy your lunch.